Call the Springfield City Council work session to order with roll call.
Mayor Van Gordon,
Here.
Counselor Weber, here, Counselor Mo,
Here.
Counselor Rodley, here, Counselor Quadros, here, Counselor Buck,
Here.
and Counselor Starr.
Here, thank you.
All right, we have one item this evening. One is the business license code update with Robin and Jeff.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Council. Jeff Pascal, Community Development Director. And with me, I have Robin Holman, who is our business licensing administrative person. And so tonight we're here to give a presentation on the business licensing and ask direction on proceeding with an update to that code section. One thing just to note is that section is in real need of update. And so that's why we're here. And then one of the other things that Robin has put together in the work that she's done is some recommendations on moving forward with adding some different things like business registration and that sort of thing. So I'm going to turn it over to her and then I'll wrap it up.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for allowing us time to present this evening. Mhm. There we go. All right. With this presentation, we're asking for your guidance on updates for Springfield Municipal Code Chapter 7 Business. The code is overdue for updates. These changes will help better align with the Springfield Development Code, improve clarity, and streamline administration. Because our current language is not easily interpreted, we often seek clarification from our city attorney's office to ensure the correct understanding, which emphasizes the need for updates. Additionally, we're seeking your guidance on proposal for the creation of a citywide business registry. Here's a list of our current licenses. They're not structured or grouped, and several licenses are outdated or rarely used, such as dance halls and other highlighted license types. Our proposal is to restructure Municipal Code Chapter 7, remove outdated licenses, and implement a business registry. Under the proposed new structure, all businesses would register either annually or have a temporary registry. A temporary business registry could be used in place of a separate Christmas tree and fireworks sales, along with the transient merchants, for those conducting business in Springfield for a short duration. Our licenses could be grouped as such. Property-related license types would still include an alarm system license as part of police's response to notification. Additionally, rental properties would include the adoption of short-term rentals into our municipal code. Substance groups would include liquor endorsements and marijuana. For the community group, we're proposing on combining our carnival and circus license with the special event license as one, and keeping our door-to-door solicitors. With this proposed structure, all remaining license types identified on our previous slide would transition into a business registry. Why establish a business registry? In the past several years of coordinating the business license program, many businesses have asked me whether the city has a business registry or a license requirement. The request for documentation at a local level has been asked to serve the need of obtaining loans, meeting insurance requirements, and facilitating product procurement. Our current response is to guide them to utilize their Oregon Business Registry. However, this high level of interest in local approval has prompted staff to research the potential benefits of a business registry. There are several positive outcomes to creating a business registry for Springfield, including validating businesses with proper documentation. Rather than licensing a small portion of our business community, it would include all businesses. It would create a historical record of businesses in the city to support planning efforts like change of use requirements, fire and life safety inspections, and economic development. It could also increase confidence among residents and consumers by providing city oversight of local businesses. Additionally, staff can collect and analyze data on businesses within Springfield. While researching the benefits of a business registry, we've learned how other municipalities operate. We've compiled some data presented to you on these next few slides using cities that are similar to Springfield's population size. Here you can see which cities have a registry or a license requirement. These next two slides are detailed and data heavy. However, they illustrate how complex fee schedules are in other municipalities based on factors such as employee count and prorated fees. Complexity can make compliance more difficult for business owners and may also create administrative challenges for staff. Our proposal is for businesses to have a registry with a simple fee structure comparable to the City of Bend's program, which features a straightforward design that makes it easy for all to navigate, and it is manageable by our current staffing level. The proposed new fee structure would include an initial application fee and a reduced renewal fee. Nonprofits would also register with proof of nonprofit status at a reduced fee. If council's guidance is to move forward with this proposal, the actual fee amounts would be presented and discussed at a later date and time. For all renewals, we're proposing shifting from a fiscal year expiration to a renewal month based on when the registry or license was first issued. This would help distribute staff workload more evenly throughout the year. If a business does not renew within a 6-month period, the initial registration process will start again. If a code enforcement action were to occur due to noncompliance, the account would be flagged and staff would complete a review and reapproval during the renewal period before issuing a new registry or license. Our thoughts for implementation approach include existing licenses would transition to a business registry, and any new businesses would be applying for a registry to establish their business. Outreach notification could include social media, mailouts, and continued partnership with the Springfield Chamber of Commerce. Here's our proposed timeline.
So tonight we're here seeking guidance on just moving forward with the updates. So looking for the head nod or consensus that yes, move forward with the updating the municipal code. Our plan would then be to work over the summer, roll Robin and the city attorney's office on updating the code. One thing to note, we have initially met with the chamber, with staff from the chamber to present this. And with that commitment, it was really just the presentation that the council saw tonight is what we discussed. The real goal would be getting that direction from the council tonight, working on a draft amendment, bringing back those details. The council would see them again in the fall, have a chance to react and give direction on that draft. And then the goal would be to adopt sometime next year in the winter so that we could then implement July 1. Since we're already on a fiscal year, it would be just easiest and cleanest to go through the process, have it adopted with implementation goal of July 1 next year.
Councilor Rodley.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation and for all of the work that went into this process, this proposed process. One of my questions is just around the transition. Often we make these changes and they look really efficient and they can be burdensome and cumbersome for the businesses. So I'm interested in what that looks like. Like I would hate for people to have to start over or fill out a whole bunch of new paperwork or like, and also I don't want to put a whole bunch of burden on the staff, but it's like, what does the transition look like in terms of actual, like, here's what people are going to have to do in order to do that, if that makes sense.
Any of our current existing licenses, I'd be able to change within our program, and then they just receive a renewal notice just as they do now with the new fee.
Councilor Moore.
What is the potential income revenue for the city?
I think, Counselor, that depends on the fee we set, right? I think what was bend is $100. And so,
I just said potential.
yeah, potential. So, I mean, I think the goal would be really to fund the program, which is about 1.5 FTE is what I would say. So the goal would be around 200,000. I don't have the numbers right now of what we generate in business license revenue. I think our goals really, aside from revenue, and it's really just funding the program, is just providing that database, responding and reacting to some of the questions and inquiries that Robin gets. And also, I think, regardless of the business registry, cleaning up the license type so that gets rid of the outdated licenses and moves to a month that they apply is their renewal month rather than fiscal year, because right now is tonight we have the master fees and schedule on the public hearing and adoption. So as soon as that's adopted, starting tomorrow, Robin's going to start generating the hundreds of letters that she has to get out, and because everybody has to renew July 1. And so it really will be more effective for staff and moderate that workload because it spreads it out over the year rather than just putting it into this 2-month, 3-month window of getting all of those letters and processing those. So to answer your question, the revenue really, we can come back with more numbers once we have that conversation on fees and we can get an idea.
Councilor Buck.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I think where I'm hung up at the moment, in terms of moving forward on this is really understanding what the businesses are going to benefit out of this. I see what the staff, I see the staffing piece and I see all of those kind of things. But if we're going to ask for additional fees from our businesses, I just want to have a little better understanding of what the value to the businesses is going to be. I mean, I get the timeline, the month that they apply, and that's certainly a benefit. And I'm not saying that there's not others, but I want to make sure that we're really clear that this is a win-win. Because I know the business community, especially in Oregon, has just continually felt that it's one-sided and their side isn't really seeing the benefits. So if we're going to go forward with this, it has to be a win for the business community and the businesses. And I'm not saying it's not. I'm just saying I'm not seeing it yet.
Okay. Anybody else? Councilor Stout.
I kind of agree with Councilor Buck on this one. And as a small business owner, I'm just not sure what I'm getting out of it. That said, I don't disagree with having licenses for various things, which require, and I think the big question we have to ask is there a reason to license businesses that have a disproportionate impact on services? Certain kinds of establishments runs versus another. So that's the question I have in my mind.
Okay. Anybody else? Councilor Quadros.
So I think there's two things. I think regardless, and the council have more opportunity to discuss this business registry, and we can do more survey feedback as we work on that code. I think that there's two things. There's the existing code language, which requires certain subset of businesses out there in the city to have a business license for whatever purpose, alcohol, marijuana, that sort of thing. So I think we need to update the code regardless. So that piece is getting that direction would be good. I think getting direction on continuing to explore a business registry. The council's not setting that code tonight. That would be further exploration and current and discussion on future fees. So I think kind of separating that out is that, one, we do need to update the code. It's outdated. We have a lot of things in there that just aren't used, and it would be helpful to simplify the process for the businesses that are currently required to register, and then continue that discussion. And I think really we're just getting kind of feedback is the council as a whole interested in moving forward and still exploring a business registry based on, like I said, the feedback we get, which is there are certain businesses that come in and say, I would like a business license, but you don't require one. Here's why I feel like, or I need one. And maybe it's still another subset. I don't know, but I think we continue that discussion.
Okay. Councilor Quadros.
I feel like you touched on what my question was when you answered this question here, but I guess my feeling would be that I wouldn't be interested in creating any barriers. And with that said, really would be interested in considering pathways for non-English speaking businesses to get here and do that also in a as pain-free, barrier-free possibility. And I don't see that at the city now. And so I would be curious that that continues to be included, or that is included.
Councilor Rodley.
Thanks. So to your two pieces, I support moving forward with more exploration on this and to cleaning things up and making them more efficient, get rid of things we don't use. I really appreciate Councilor Quadros calling that out. And I think that I would love to see that be part of this too, is, to add in that inclusive and that language access piece. If we're really going to overhaul the system, I think that's a great idea.
Anything? Anybody else? All right. So I think, Councilor Mill.
I'm really curious about the real definition of a business as we go along. Like corporations, is that a business, or assume business name, things like that? There's a lot of them out there, and I'd like to know more about it.
I think I'm supportive of modernizing the code that we have today, and that's going to take you over the summer for folks to work. You could get me there on the registry, right? This has been a little bit of an on-off topic throughout the city. I think taking time to go out and talk to the business community and make sure we have the value proposition for what everybody's going to get out of it. And I'm not concerned about revenue or recovery of the cost. Right now, I think we just have to really get clear and define if we're going to do it. Is it easy to access? Do we have the data available that makes our business climate more competitive? And what does that actually look like? I think that's an important part of the conversation. I'm fine with you continuing to have some conversations with the chamber, continuing to work on it, approaching it with a sense of curiosity. That could be a very easy way to get the regulatory burden down across the set of businesses, right? Because it just simplifies everything. But I think we just want to keep this conversation going a little bit, just based on where we've ended up historically with the business community, right? Because this is not a source of revenue. This is about gathering data and simplifying the regulatory environment so that we can be more competitive. Okay, anybody else? Do you have enough direction?
Yeah, I think we have what we need. Yeah,
All right.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. We are adjourned. We will reconvene at 7 o'clock for the regular meeting. Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. I'm going to call the Springfield City Council regular session to order with roll call.
Mayor Van Gordon.
Here.
Councilor Weber.
Here.
Councilor Moe.
Here.
Councilor Rodley.
Here.
Councilor Quadros.
Here.
Councilor Buck.
Present.
And Councilor Stout.
Here, thank you. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. We've got, looks like I'm maybe missing a part of my script. So there's two chances to give public testimony tonight. One is business from the audience, and one is. I was going to get it on my own. This was a test to see if I passed. So the two times for designated for public testimony for this evening, public hearings and business from the audience. If you are attending in person, please complete the request to speak card located at the front of the council chambers and turn them into the city recorder. If you're joining us online with a tablet, smartphone, or computer and wish to speak to us for either of those times, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom. The order of public testimony is as follows. Anyone in person in the council chambers and anyone who has raised their virtual hand. First item, please.
Mayor, the first item is Springfield Upbeat. That item is the 2026 Springfield Heritage Awards, and this is your item.
Excellent. Actually, I don't know where Emily went. Before I read the citation for Judy Harold, I asked Emily just to make a couple comments about the significant amount of librarians that are in the room, because she was excited like we were getting the band back together.
Okay, good evening, Mayor and Councilors. I'm excited to have the former full squad of the library here tonight to celebrate Judy's award. So when I started in 2009, this group of librarians had been working together for 30 to 35 years, many of them. And so we have here this evening, Brad Sargent, Jenny Peterson, Cindy Dustrude, Patty Buff Bear, our honorary guest and award winner, Judy Harold, Barbara Thompson, and did I miss anybody? So these folks were the ones that stewarded our library for many, many years, and they're here to celebrate one of their colleagues for her award. And I should introduce Ben Harold is also here with his mom.
Well, thank you for doing that, Emily, and thank you for joining us. It's good to see you all. We really will get the band back together right after this meeting. So for the 2026 History Maker Award, it goes to Judy Harold. So I'm going to read the citation, and then Judy, I'm going to have you up to get the award and get a picture. In recognition of her decades-long commitment to literacy, intellectual freedom, and inclusive community service through the Springfield Public Library, we're proud to name Judy Harold as the recipient of the 2026 History Maker Award. Serving as the Children's Services Librarian from 1980 to 2006, Judy transformed the library's Youth Services Department into a welcoming and innovative space for children and families of all backgrounds. Her work helped generations of Springfield's youth discover a lifelong love of reading while ensuring the library remained a safe and accessible community resource during periods of significant economic and social change in our region. Judy's impact extended far beyond traditional library services. She developed outreach partnerships with local schools serving low-income families, helped establish the nonprofit First Book program to provide books to disadvantaged children, and expanded Spanish language collections and multicultural programming to better serve Springfield's growing Latin community. A strong advocate for First Amendment rights and equitable access to information, Judy became a statewide voice for intellectual freedom during a divisive period in our local history. Through innovation, compassion, and unwavering public service, Judy Harold has helped shape a more inclusive and culturally connected Springfield. Congratulations.
Barbara, Judy, Edna, Cindy, Jenny. Okay. Oh. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Wonderful. Congratulations.
It sits very nicely.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
All right. The second award is the Preservation Excellence Award for illuminating Indigenous roots. In recognition of its innovative and collaborative approach to cultural education and heritage stewardship, we're pleased to present the 2026 Springfield Heritage Award for Preservation Excellence to the Illuminating Indigenous Roots educational program. Hosted at Thurston High School in April 2025, the full-day program engaged more than 1,200 students and teachers through immersive presentations and workshops led by the Native cultural leaders, educators, artists, and advocates. Designed to align with student learning outcomes and curriculum standards, the event explored Indigenous languages, traditional foods, music, arts, oral history, and contemporary Native identity through a wide range of classroom lessons and hands-on experiences. Developed through partnerships between the Springfield Public Library Museum, Springfield Public Schools, Lane ESD's Native Youth Wellness Program, Native student organizations, and local cultural leaders, the project created meaningful opportunities for students to engage directly with Indigenous voices and traditions connected to the region. Highlights included Indigenous drumming workshops, first food education, language instruction, and the creation of a community mural gifted to the school's Native American Student Union. By centering Native perspectives and fostering ongoing relationships between schools and Indigenous communities, illuminating the Indigenous roots made a significant contribution to preserving, sharing, and honoring the cultural heritage of Springfield and the surrounding region. Congratulations. Mindy's here to accept it. We had a couple folks that could not make it tonight, and we will arrange a second time to thank them. All right, next item, please.
Mayor, the next item is the consent calendar.
I move approval of the consent calendar.
Second.
Will, could you call a vote, please?
Yes, Counselor Weber,
Yes.
Counselor Mo,
Yes.
Counselor Rodley,
Yes.
Counselor Quadros,
Yes.
Counselor Buck,
Yes.
and Counselor Stout.
Yes, thank you.
Motion passes 6 yeses, 0 no's. Next item, please.
The next item is under public hearings. Mayor, this first item was inadvertently noted as a public hearing, so it would be up to the council if you'd like to still hold the public hearing or just vote.
I don't think we have any cards. You have hands for this item?
All right, but that first item is the proposed text amendments to the Glenwood Employment Mixed Use District of the Springfield Development Code and certain sections of the 2014 Glenwood Refinement Plan. This is a second reading.
All right. Does anybody have any questions before? I think we're ready. Counselor Weber.
I move to adopt an ordinance that amends text of the Springfield Development Code and the adopted 2014 Glenwood Refinement Plan.
Second.
Danielle, could you call the vote, please?
Yes, Counselor Weber,
Yes.
Counselor Mo,
Yes.
Counselor Rodley,
Yes.
Counselor Quadros,
Yes.
Counselor Buck,
Yes.
and Counselor Stout.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Before we call the next item, I do have a public hearing outline. So before we begin this evening, I'd like to take a moment to outline the protocol and expectations of the public hearings. First, I want to thank everyone for being here tonight and for taking the time to participate. Public input is an essential part of our decision-making process, and we value the opportunity to hear from our community. We have one public hearing tonight and one quasi-judicial hearing this evening. The first is the master fees and charges update. The second is the quasi-judicial hearing for annexation of 2 vacant lots at 500 and 700 International Way. Tonight's public comment period is specifically dedicated to the topic of these public hearings. I ask that all remarks stay focused on the item before the council. This helps maintain a clear and productive record and ensures that everyone's time is respected. If you wish to speak and have not yet signed up, please complete a request to speak card and hand it to the city recorder. Speakers will be called in the order in which they've signed up. Once your name is called, please come forward to the microphone, state your name for the record, and then begin your remarks. If you are online, please raise your virtual hand. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to address the council. We ask that all speakers and audience members maintain respectful conduct throughout the public hearing portion of the evening. This means no interruptions, no applause, and no verbal reactions, positive or negative, while others are speaking. This ensures a safe and fair space for every participant. Offensive language or disruptive behavior will not be tolerated. With those guidelines in place, we look forward to hearing from each of you. Next item, please.
The next item is master fees and charges update. Jeff Pascal is here for this item.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you. Tonight, you're being asked to hold a public hearing on the master fees and charges. You have reviewed all of the various fees in a series of work sessions in the month of April. The copy you have, there's no significant changes from the time you saw it in the end of April to now. One thing to note is that staff has been doing research, working with the city attorney's office, especially on the credit card fee charge. One thing I'll say is it's a lot more complex to just add a fee. It's not just as simple as add a fee to the charges. So what we're asking is to kind of get direction tonight. The recommendation is 3.2%. We'll go and continue to do the research, and then we'll be back to you later in the fall with more of what that entails to add that fee. I think then also at that direction at that time, we'll have more time to put into place and do some research on, is there a cap? Like, does it start at 500, 1,000, and then you pay this service charge? But again, we took council's direction. It's just a lot more complex. Each credit card has kind of what I've learned from the city attorney is each credit card kind of has a separate agreement, what you can't do. And so it's just going to take a little bit of time.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions? Okay. I'm going to open the public hearing. I don't have any cards for this item. Neil, do you have any hands?
It doesn't appear we have any hands for this item.
All right, I close the public hearing.
I move to adopt a resolution amending master fees and charges schedule sections 1 through 11 with an effective date of July 1, 2026.
Second.
Please.
Yes, Counselor Weber,
Yes.
Counselor Mo,
Yes.
Counselor Rodley,
Yes.
Counselor Quadros,
Yes.
Counselor Buck,
Yes.
and Counselor Stout.
Yes, thank you.
Motion passes, 6 yeses, 0 noes. Next item, please.
The next item is the annexation of territory to the city of Springfield, annexing 2 vacant adjoining parcels comprising approximately 17.99 acres in the North Gateway area of Springfield. Subject parcels are located to the north of International Way between properties addressed as 500 and 700 International Way, and to the east of the former Royal Caribbean Call Center. Andy Limherd and Christina Kraz are here for this item.
All right. This matter is a public hearing continued from an earlier meeting on May 18th. Before we hear the staff report, the Assistant City Attorney will provide a statement regarding the procedures for tonight's hearing.
Thank you, Mayor. Council, the annexation hearing tonight is characterized as a quasi-judicial hearing. Quasi-judicial means that the applicant and public are entitled to certain rights in this process. These rights include the right to notice, to present evidence, to have a written decision based on standards, and to an impartial decision maker. Oregon law requires the council act as an impartial decision maker. Councilors must disclose any ex parte contacts that have not already been disclosed, independent knowledge of relevant facts, or conflicts of interest related to this matter. And as a reminder, conflicts of interest must be declared at each meeting, even if they were already declared. A conflict of interest is a situation in which the decision maker, his or her family, or their business would or could suffer or benefit by the decision maker's decision. An ex parte contact is a communication to the decision maker that includes substantive issues regarding the application and occurs outside the public venue. Independent knowledge of relevant facts is information known to the decision maker about the application from a source outside the public venue, such as a visit to the site in question. Mayor, please query the council about any conflicts of interest or new ex parte contacts or independent knowledge of relevant facts, and state any you may have as well.
Councilor Moore, you want to start?
I have no conflict of interest or anything, so.
I think you also need to say if you have any ex parte contacts too.
Well, that's what I sort of meant. I haven't talked to anybody. What do I say?
Yeah, that's fine. Councilor Buck.
I have no conflicts of interest or real or potential bias. I did have a conversation in passing with Councilor Stout about agenda items. We didn't really specifically talk about this item other than to mention that it was on the agenda for tonight, but it did come up in our conversation.
I get to start all over again. I have a potential conflict of interest as a property owner in the Gateway area. Also have a potential conflict of interest as I work for Health and Human Services for Lane County. I am not in the same division. And as I said last time, I have been inundated with many meeting topics and emails and information about this project for the past year plus. That does not, I don't know anything that anybody else doesn't know. Also had lots of ex parte contacts as we were moving through the legislative process around the supersiding bill and just around this particular property. I do not have any additional ex parte contacts since our last meeting. And I'm looking at Christina's face. I think I did it properly. I feel like I get a gold star.
Yes.
Thank you.
Councilor Wadley, tonight you only would need to disclose any ex parte contacts or independent knowledge of relevant facts that weren't disclosed last time or that were new from the last meeting. So anything from
nothing new.
Yeah.
Same conflicts, but nothing new. Same potential conflicts, but nothing new.
I don't have any additional ex parte contacts. I do have a potential conflict of interest. My employer is a health insurance company that is United Health Group. They do business with Peace Health.
I have no potential conflicts of interest. I did have one very quick conversation with a commissioner a couple days after our last meeting on this topic, and nothing was said that has not already been publicly stated.
Sorry, and were those public statements in the record for this? Are they in materials from the applicant or materials from the property owner?
It was really around kind of more the process of the annexation request.
Okay.
And just, I mean, there was nothing, I don't think, substantive about it. It was just a very quick kind of a recap-y thing of what we talked about at the last meeting.
Okay, thank you. I think the last meeting is in the record. So then the subject of that subject matter was the last meeting, then that would be already in the record.
So no new conflicts of interest, ex parte contacts, or independent knowledge of relevant facts.
I have no conflicts of interest, no new ex parte contacts, or new independent knowledge.
All right, we got through the first step. We will now continue the public hearing. Well, we got to do staff report first.
And you get to hear from me again because I provided you the only new material for your packet tonight, which was a council briefing memo to try to address some of the questions that you had last time. I thought I would start with maybe a framework for your decision making as you're starting to get into that part of the process. Oftentimes criteria of approval for applications are independent from each other. And it is true that all of them have to be met in order for you to approve an application. What I think is really helpful about the annexation criteria of approval is that the order they appear in the code, which is the order they're laid out in the staff report, is a decision-making framework for the council. So you can think of each criteria getting sort of slightly more specific or a different threshold that depends upon the prior criteria. So the first one is the property even legally able under Oregon law to be annexed? Is it contiguous to city limits and separated, and part of the urban growth boundary? Yes, nobody has disputed that criteria in this application, thankfully. The second is the annexation consistent with the comprehensive plan policies? If you decide it's not consistent with the comprehensive plan policies, we don't need to go further into the analysis of the public facilities and services and fiscal side of things. The analysis kind of stops at the plan. If you find that it's consistent with the overall plan policies, then it might, you would next look at, is the proposed annexation going to result in a boundary. So after that property is annexed, will the entire boundary of city limits provide the minimum level of key urban facilities and services in an orderly, efficient, and timely manner? And then if you decide that the city has appropriately planned for and will provide those services in an orderly, timely, and efficient manner with this annexation context, then you would move on to, okay, well, what are the fiscal impacts on the city for providing those public facilities and services? And is there an annexation agreement or another mechanism in place to appropriately mitigate those? So it's I think, going to be helpful for the council to think of those sort of in the order that they appear. Sometimes criteria of approval can be just like pick one and go with that one, but I think this case is complex enough that will help the council to think through in the order that they're in the staff report. In the council briefing memo then in your packet as attachment 1, there were a few questions that I wanted to briefly hit on. The first was a question that was of some dispute between the applicant and adjacent property owners who testified in opposition, and the staff report, which is how does the city council consider the applicant's future intended use of the property, future development plans when you're looking at the annexation? The applicants argued it's irrelevant. The neighboring property owners have said, no, it's very relevant. There was discussion in the comments received that were sent to you via email from the neighboring property owners about the cases cited in the County and Peace Health's comments from the 18th. So the CBM explains from City Attorney's Office perspective what the case law really says is that council has to look at your criteria of approval for annexation. You would not use the site plan review criteria of approval as your basis to decide if this annexation, could be granted or not, or the floodplain, review criteria. You have to look to the city's criteria of approval. But the city's criteria of approval for annexation does require some consideration of the future proposed use of the property. That's our recommendation. And that's based on the specific wording in the criteria of approval and in the comp plan policies around urbanization. The Springfield's comp plan is set up to say, is it consistent with the city's plan for development, and are there orderly, efficient, and timely key public facilities and services? That phrase, orderly, efficient, and timely, requires the council to have some idea of what the proposed future use of the property is, because clearly orderly, efficient provision of water service to a single house is going to be a smaller size pipe than to a brand new shopping mall with 100 public restroom stalls. Just, the size and location and all of that is going to be different. And the same thing goes with wastewater, stormwater, traffic, police services. The applicants talked about somebody can come in, single family home with failing septic with, no plan to redevelopment, or they could develop vacant property. And that definitely does happen. And the city doesn't require a specific development plan, but you do require a utility plan. And that utility plan needs to be informed by potential future development. Typically, if there's no specific idea or plan in mind, that's just what's allowed in the zoning and what's a reasonable assumption based on the underlying zoning. This annexation is unique because the applicants have been very clear that they don't intend to pursue the uses that are allowed in the underlying zoning. They're by the city's code or the city's zoning map. They're intending to pursue a use that's allowed by state law that may have different impacts on those public facilities and services. So that's something that the council needs to weigh and consider, is how does that different plan than what's in the zoning then relate back to those criteria? Any questions on that? I think that was kind of a big point of contention that if, we can provide advice on that, it will help the council move forward. I think the way that supersiding applies to the annexation is it changes what those likely proposed future uses are to not just the campus industrial uses, but the idea that it may qualify under the state supersiding law for a different set of uses. And so the council can consider those different set of uses and applying your criteria. And then there's questions around the conceptual street map and the TSP. I think that the key, this kind of shifts from those comp plan policy criteria down into the orderly, timely, and efficient provision of services. Fundamentally, that's what the TSP is intended to do. It's intended to provide the transportation network that guarantees the orderly, efficient, and timely provision of streets, public transit, bike ped facilities. If you can conclude that the application is consistent with those TSP policies and those planned projects, then it would, it would show that for streets and transportation that it meets the criteria related to those public facilities and services. The conceptual street map shows some planned local collectors. I think what's important is it doesn't show local streets and doesn't create specific lines on a map for where local streets can go. So the city council's free to require a local street connection in a location that you believe will provide orderly, timely, and efficient local street service to a property without needing that to be shown on the conceptual street map, because the conceptual street map doesn't show local streets. I think that's a key point to call your attention to. And then similarly, Gateway Beltline, the TSP establishes several projects that are needed, and the council's given direction that you'd like to prioritize a study project over pursuing any of those specific projects right now. And so you're looking at a study project for Gateway Beltline. That's through a separate work session. You provided that direction. The applicant has given transportation data that tries to show it's consistent with the TSP to annex this property for these specific uses, because the traffic patterns are not too dissimilar or too much, or overall less impactful, I would say, than if the property annexed under the campus industrial zoning, which is what the TSP was based on. And then staff have proposed that one option the council could go with is that the applicants would pay for that transportation study, which would then be the way that fiscal impacts are mitigated. And happy to answer more questions on that. I know you got more information on that traffic analysis very late, and I don't expect that you've looked at that. Definitely would like to have the transportation, our transportation planner and transportation engineer look at those numbers in a little more detail. But that could, we can talk about that in the staff response or rebuttal when we get there. That was a really quick overview of the content in the CBM, but I'm happy to take questions from the council now, or you can ask them later during the rebuttal time.
Are there any questions? Cool. Councilman Moe, do you have specific questions?
You talked about the local streets that aren't on the map yet, and that the council should be deciding what they are. I don't think we're qualified to do that. So how would we do that in a proper way?
So the city staff have made a recommendation on what the street network should be, following a plan that was in a 1998 agreement and then subsequently shown on the partition plat for the property, based on and we've analyzed in the staff report how that matches to the criteria of approval for local streets, not because those criteria of approval apply to the annexation, but because those criteria give a good basis for establishing what's orderly and efficient. The applicants have proposed a different alignment of the street, and they have their own reasons that they believe that that's more orderly and efficient. And I think the council will just have to make a policy decision on what factors are more important to you, and which street alignment would you prefer to require through an annexation agreement if it gets to that.
I didn't realize it was that easy.
I mean, I think that there's definitely a lot of expertise that goes into those recommendations, but you've got the universe of information in front of you for the facts that have been provided, and I think you get to make decisions based off those recommendations and facts.
All right, other questions? All right, I think we're going to be ready for the applicant. Thank you. We're going to now continue the public hearing. The applicant will present first. And I'll note for the public, the applicant is not subject to the 3-minute limit. You've got to hit the button until it goes green. You're on.
All right. Good evening, Mayor, City Council. Again, for the record, my name is Mike Reeder. I'm an attorney representing Peace Health, and Peace Health and Lane County as co-applicants have asked me to present this evening and this important annexation request and the related annexation agreement. First of all, I'd like to thank staff and your city attorney's office for the good work that they've done. Their diligence and professionalism really shines through. It's been my experience as a practicing attorney that the city of Springfield's planning department and your city attorney's office does a first-rate job in representing the interests of the city. They dot their I's, they cross their T's. They're very professional. The tradition, I think, I don't know if it started with Joe Leahy, but it certainly continued with Joe Leahy. And because of that, we appreciate the professionalism that staff and the city attorney's office has provided. City of Springfield has a well-earned reputation for fostering a healthy business environment, and we understand the need for this body to carefully consider the concerns and the opinions of highly respected business folks. In Oregon and in other states throughout the United States, when it comes to land use decision making, there's often a collision of interests where there really is no bad guy. And in our polarized world, sometimes the standard operating procedure is to find a bad guy and find a villain. That won't happen tonight. We're here to ask basically two things. One, that the city council approve the annexation because the annexation request meets the criteria for approval. The 4 criteria, A, B, C, and D, that was outlined by your city attorney. And this is the same annexation criteria that has been in place for all annexation applications since the Lane County Boundary Commission was disbanded by Senate Bill 417 in 2007. We're not asking for any different consideration than those other applications for annexation. The second thing that we're asking this body to do tonight, or when the time is appropriate, is to direct staff to draft an annexation agreement with terms. But let me back up. It's my understanding that the vast majority of the terms for a draft annexation agreement have been agreed to between the applicants and city staff. I think what's remaining for the city council to decide is the street configuration as depicted by in the applicant's maps that we'll talk about tonight, and also a provision for transportation contribution of up to $321,000 for the study of an alternative to the couplet for the Beltline Gateway intersection. So together, the applicants they've stipulated to pay that $321,000 for that study to help the city find an alternative to the extremely expensive couplet that we all are concerned about. From the May 18th hearing, it's clear that there's at least 3 issues that are not necessarily directly related to the criteria that the council has. I will try and address them before getting into the criterion for approval. And the first one is the supersiding bill, the why and whether it applies. And the second one is why this location and not the Riverbend campus. And then I'll get into the third in a second, but these are kind of 2 biggies. I'm actually going to start with the second question because I think as I worked with my client to answer this question in detail that will give you the comfort that you need to make the decision to approve the annexation, I think it will be helpful. And let's see if I can work this here. You're going to have to show me where. Yeah, that's intuitive. Thanks. Thanks, Andy. Okay, so you've seen this before. The Lane County property is in blue. The Peace Health property is in green. FedEx is to the west of the Peace Health property. Royal Caribbean is west of the Lane County property. Okay, so why this location versus the Riverbend campus? So as discussed in the May 18th hearing, Lane County and Peace Health analyzed the entire community for all potential sites within the Eugene and Springfield UGBs. Peace Health specifically analyzed other Peace Health-owned properties, including the Riverbend campus and the Riverbend Annex, which is the old Sony property. None of those properties were adequate for these two facilities. While certainly not a criteria for approval, it's clearly an issue on the minds of Richardson and G Group. Let me start by saying that Peace Health has a 100-year plan for the Riverbend property, and we're 25 years into that plan. Peace Health came to Springfield and acquired what is now the Sacred Heart at Riverbend campus in order to fulfill that 100-year vision. It was a vision that could not be achieved at the landlocked University District in Eugene. Expansion there was not an option, so Peace Health purchased the property in Springfield because it supported the long-term goals and growth projections. At the time, the CEO of Peace Health, Alan Yorty, stated, "We're building for people we never know, will never know, people who will long outlive us. We are determined to do it right, to do it once, and not to find ourselves constrained and landlocked 50 years from now." So for this particular use, for Peace Health, the behavioral health unit, our services started in 1969, the Johnson unit. 40 years later, that unit needed to be updated. And today we have 35 beds when the need is at least 96. And in 2020, Peace Health started looking to expand the unit again to better support the community needs. The goal was to increase capacity to 96 beds. Peace Health looked at repurposing several buildings, existing buildings, and this was before the partnership with Lane County or the idea of co-locating these services. Peace Health looked at renovating the main tower at the University District, the ancillary building, the medical education research building, and other buildings in the UD campus. Peace Health also extensively looked at repurposing the annex building here in Springfield. All of those potential solutions were not solutions for a variety of reasons, but mostly because of the need for seismic upgrades and other federal regulations. It became clear that Peace Health needed land for a new facility to meet the goal. We looked at new development, the Riverbend campus, annex property. They were all heavily analyzed. And like most developers, we use several metrics for evaluating land to help us guide us through the highest and best use. One of those metrics, and this is important, is providing direct support to Riverbend's specialty programs that I'm going to talk about in a second. This is the same process that we used when analyzing the location for the new inpatient rehabilitation hospital that was also in the campus industrial zone. And you will remember we went through a plan amendment zone change process at that time because that particular hospital, even though it has the term hospital, is not a hospital for tertiary, life-saving, 24-hour care. The Oregon Health Authority regulates hospitals, and there are 46 of those hospitals in the state of Oregon. The inpatient rehabilitation hospital is not on that list, and neither will the Timber Springs Hospital. It's not that type of hospital that requires co-location with a level 2 trauma hospital. In other words, this use does not need to be adjacent to the Riverbend Hospital. So from the Oregon Health Authority, trauma hospitals, which the Riverbend campus is one, and the inpatient rehabilitation hospital is not, and the Timber Spring hospitals will not be. Trauma hospitals are distinguished from other facilities in that they guarantee the immediate availability of surgeons, anesthesiologists, physician specialists, nurses, ancillary services, and resuscitation life support equipment on a 24-hour-a-day basis dedicated to the care of trauma patients. Trauma facilities are designated or categorized as level 1, 2, 3, or 4, with level 1 and 2 centers offering the highest levels of care. So again, Oregon has 46 of those hospitals. There are other specialty hospitals that do not fit that category. Riverbend is unique. There are only 4 level 2 trauma hospitals in the state of Oregon. They're all in Portland. There are only 5 level 1 hospitals in Portland. There are 5 level 2 trauma hospitals, and Riverbend is one of those. It's a unique, highly performing level 2 trauma facility, and it's one of the largest hospitals between Portland and San Francisco. So the opponents asked the question, well, what are those uses that need to be near the Riverbend, on the Riverbend campus? Those include comprehensive stroke center, certified primary stroke, cancer care, heart and vascular care, neuro and spine surgery, robotics, hyperbaric center, sleep center, wound care, infusion, pediatrics, bariatrics, orthopedics, childbirth and neonatal care, advanced ICU, obviously the emergency department, gamma knife, and imaging. Again, we have 75 years left of the 100-year plan, and we only have 21 vacant acres of property on the Riverbend campus that is designated and set aside for medical services. The other property that's available is medium density residential. So I mention all of this because it helps illustrate the value of the Riverbend campus as a community resource. Riverbend, the Oregon Health Authority regulates hospitals in such a way that there are regions where the level 2 hospitals have to provide a certain type of service to communities. And there's a map, and we're in there's 7 regions, and we're in region 3. So Peace Health has made a commitment to this community to provide that level of care for the next 75 years and beyond. And to cannibalize the Riverbend campus for a hospital that does not require adjacency to the Riverbend campus cuts against that vision. This means that future expansion on the current footprint of the Riverbend campus is the only viable option. Population growth in Eugene and Springfield has increased 23% in the last 25 years. We are less than a quarter of way into our 100-year vision for that process, and we were landlocked in the U district after 50 years. So the criteria for development needs to be focused on providing direct support for all of the specialty services that I listed. The clear vision makes the decision process easy for the BHU. It doesn't provide direct support to specialty services and therefore does not need to be located on the campus. The land left at the Riverbend campus that's zoned for these future medical services that require adjacency, as I said, is 21 acres. This site is 18 acres. If we were to swap, even if it didn't require that entire 18 acres, it would take a substantial amount of very valuable property, valuable not just to Riverbend, a nonprofit, but for this entire community. And that's why we still feel so strongly about this. So you will remember that in January of 2024, the City Council approved the plan amendment zone change for the inpatient rehabilitation hospital. At that time, the City Council took 5 acres from campus industrial and changed it to medical services. At that time, there was no opposition. Richardson didn't show up, G Group didn't show up. And in fact, we received a response from many of the city councilors, or a couple of the city councilors, wondering whether we should have asked for a larger plan amendment zone change. Staff had characterized the CI zone as a zone in transition, with the early colonizers and site occupiers of the Gateway CI zone leaving: Symantec, Sony Disc, Royal Caribbean. And then it was characterized that this trend of those early colonizers leaving as being an evolution towards healthcare in this area and other related uses. So I want to just transition really quickly to the why the House Bill 2005. This is just for illustration purposes. The subject property there is in blue on the north, and then the inpatient rehabilitation hospital, the 5 acres that was rezoned, is there adjacent to the the Riverbend Annex, the old Sony Disc property. And then you can see at the bottom right corner is the hospital in the Riverbend campus, just to give you an idea. Okay. So why House Bill 2005? Well, the intended use of the territory to be annexed is a unique use to Oregon and very rare in the United States. You received a lot of testimony on May 18th about the characteristics that are in the intended uses and how they work together, how the Timber Springs and the Stabilization Center will work together, And you heard a lot of testimony about the serious mental health crisis facing our community. A stabilization center coupled with a behavioral health hospital is a relatively new concept in use. The nature of our statewide land use system provides the opportunity for opponents to challenge the city's determination that the proposed use is an allowed use in the particular zone. Even if we think that it's an allowed use, opponents could take a different tack. In order to clear the way for any ambiguity about whether this new use was an allowed use, our state partners felt it advisable to seek certainty from the state legislature. And while I believe the intended use is an allowed use in the zones, some people could take issue with that. And so because mental health has a certain stigma associated with it, and because it's such an important issue that's facing not only the state, but this community, it was felt that it was important to set us on the right track, and the supersiding bill was an attempt to do that. So examples of supersiding, or where the federal or the state government takes over some local decision making, it's pretty common. At the federal level, there's the Clear Water Act, where the federal government will regulate wetlands. There's the Americans with Disabilities Act, the Fair Housing Act, and as I said last time, the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act. Those federal laws, in part, are meant to help clear away the local opposition to uses that are disfavored. Examples at the state level are more numerous, but include the Needed Housing Act, middle housing laws, and other so-called supersiding laws, including the state psychiatric hospital in Junction City. At the City Council public hearing on May 18th, several councilors voiced displeasure with their belief that Lane County in particular had not been forthcoming with its efforts to seek passage of the supersiding bill. In 2025, the Oregon legislature adopted the extensive bill relating to behavioral health. As part of that bill, the legislature adopted what is commonly referred to as the supersiding provisions, and that bill, that's section 60 and 61 of that bill. This bill and those provisions in particular were a high priority for the governor's office, as she recognized the dire need for improvements to the state's treatment of persons with behavioral health conditions. The supersiding section was considered by both the governor and the legislature as a needed component for the overall recognition that these facilities need to be built in short order. The procedures for gaining approval needed to be streamlined. Federal law has long recognized that certain facilities and institutions with persons with disabilities require extra protections because of the stigma that's attached to them. As early as March 17th, 2025, attorneys for both Peace Health and Lane County met and shared with the city attorneys a legislative concept, which was well before the supersiding bill was provided to any legislators. The county and Peace Health attorneys initiated these meetings with the city because there was an awareness of the sensitivity of a supersiding bill that would supersede some of the city's authority over siting these facilities. And on March 20th, 2025, the county council sent an email communication to the city attorney's office acknowledging the city's concerns about infrastructure standards and indicating that the county's lobbyists would be revising the bill to address those issues. And you see those in sections 60 and 61 of the supersiding bill. Again, that in-person meeting was held at City Hall on April 4th, 2025, before the bill was submitted. As a result of this collaboration, the adopted bill contains requirements for public facilities and services in direct responses to the city. Again, as I said, the city's city attorney's office looking for the well-being of the city of Springfield, to which the city's attorney's office should be commended. So the question is whether and when the House Bill 2005 applies. As I said before, we do not believe that House Bill 2005 applies because this is an application for an annexation. But there was questions about that. Yes, there is an intended use. Obviously, we're talking about it. The question arose by some, well, why are you talking about the use if you're telling us that the annexation criteria doesn't require it? Well, there's a couple of answers for that. One is the annexation agreement that the city staff is requiring that we go through looks at use. We were told to look at the use. And so we did. We hired Kelly Sandow of Sandow Engineering to provide a comprehensive transportation planning rule analysis to show the potential impacts to the transportation system. What's important to understand about that is that the TPRA, that analysis is typically done for a plan amendment zone change, like the one we did for the inpatient rehabilitation hospital. When you are doing a plan amendment zone change, state law requires that you show that you don't have any significant effect to the transportation system. Annexation doesn't have that same responsibility. The criteria is different. It's much more toned down. So the reason why we did it was out of an abundance of caution and to show that the CI zone, if you were to annex the property, if we were to come in with this wasn't Peace Health or Lane County, if this was just a landowner, say it's the Rices or some former owner, and they said, we want to annex this property and the zoning is CI. We don't have a plan. We don't know what we're going to do. They wouldn't be required to do a TPRA. They wouldn't be required to do any of that. It would go through, like many of the other annexation applications that I researched in preparation for tonight's meeting, it would just be assumed this is how it's going to work under the current zoning. The supersiding bill doesn't change that in that you still have your criteria for approval. Criterion A, which Ms. Kratz talked about, which is fairly easy, B, C, and D. Well, that criteria for approval has been met. We showed it in our application. We showed it in the transportation planning rule analysis. What's important to understand is that the CI zone is already, the potential uses in the CI zone has already been analyzed by the city when you adopted your transportation system plan. When you adopt the transportation system plan, you have to take the allowed uses in the entire urban growth boundary, and you have to analyze those to determine whether or not your facilities will meet the standards of the city within that 20-year planning horizon, which is 2035. So in this particular case, if we wanted to develop this property for CI uses, we wouldn't have to go through a transportation planning rule analysis because it's already baked into the cake. Now, out of an abundance of caution, we provided a transportation planning rule analysis, and what that analysis shows is that this particular intended use, should it be proposed and developed, will actually improve the intersection at Gateway Beltline. Because the way that the city analyzes transportation, there's overall traffic, so we would be reducing overall trips, but also the PM peak hour trips will be reduced. And so the level of service, or I'm sorry, the level of service V over C, I'm sorry, not the Oregon Department of Transportation V over C ratio. Okay, this is right here, shows that under a worst case scenario for the CI zone, you'd be at 1.01, and the lower the number, the better. And with the proposed use, it's 0.98. So the actual proposal, the use will generate a total of 197 fewer trips. And there will be significantly fewer PM trips through that intersection. Notwithstanding that fact, the applicants are still willing to pay the $321,000 to pay for a study to help mitigate the problem that already exists there at Beltline and Gateway. Okay, let's look at the criteria. Criterion B, the proposed annexation is consistent with the applicable policies of the Springfield Comprehensive Plan, Metro Plan, and any applicable refinement plans in the plan district. We have shown that we meet the criteria for the comprehensive plan. What's important to understand is that it's the proposed annexation, not the intended use or the anticipated use, but it's the annexation itself is consistent with applicable policies of the Springfield Comprehensive Plan. And then annexation criterion C. The proposed annexation will result in a boundary in which the minimum level of key urban facilities and services as defined in the Springfield Comprehensive Plan can be provided in an orderly, efficient, and timely manner. Key urban facilities include transportation, where applicable, and then D is where applicable, fiscal impacts to the city have been mitigated through an annexation agreement. And as I've stated before, the applicants have agreed to, again, the vast majority of the terms that the city is demanding for an annexation agreement, including the $321,000. And what we are asking the city council to do is to give direction to the city attorney's office to include terms in the annexation agreement for the applicant to provide the transportation network that we're proposing. And in this slide, you'll see in yellow, we're proposing up to 49 feet of a local street from International Way to where it terminates on the Lane County property and turns orange. Lane County would then dedicate and construct a local street in orange. And then the jog north would be the green, would be dedicated by Lane County for the future installation of minor collector consistent with the transportation system plan. So if you can see in this slide, in green is the city's adopted transportation system plan showing collectors on, and we've just overlaid it on this map here. So what we're proposing is that that Lane County would provide a north-south connection for a minor collector, alleviating the burden from the Royal Caribbean property owners. You see there in green. That is the location shown on the city's transportation system plan. We would shift that over just a few feet onto the Lane County property. So we would actually be implementing the city's ultimate policy choices regarding transportation. Now, as much as I respect the city attorney's office, there's obviously oftentimes where we disagree. Where we disagree is that the city does not have the discretion to tell us where a local street will go. The transportation system plan is meant, and we've gone over this on the May 18th, it's meant to provide certainty to landowners. You know where the city wants to put the collectors, the arterials, the highways. Local streets are not on that conceptual plan. And I find no support for the statement that the city can just ad hoc impose local streets on these particular properties. So if that were the case, you wouldn't need the 1998 Rice Agreement that originally provided the city with the ability to have a street go through the middle of the Lane County property. That would destroy the Lane County's property either for Lane County's purposes or for a future owner for future development consistent with the CI zone. And so and think about this for a minute. If the city council were to dictate the location of local streets, well, first of all, you don't know exactly what's going to be developed there. So dictating where local streets goes would be, you don't have the expertise to do that. But the developer, so for example, if this property were residential and a residential developer wanted to develop to residential standards, the city wouldn't, through an annexation agreement, require where the local streets go. There would be no basis for that. So with all due respect, I respectfully disagree with that suggestion that you can just require as part of the annexation Lane County to have the street go through the middle of the property. But more to the point, in 2005, the city already took that off the table. In the 2005 agreement, which by the way did not come from us, it came from the good work and the due diligence of your city attorney by looking through the files and finding the unrecorded but lawfully executed 2005 amendment to the Rice Agreement, which was provided to us just, the Friday before the Monday hearing. And again, there was no mischievousness about that. It happened to be in a file. Okay. Nobody knew. We had suspicions that there might have been an agreement, because we talked with the former owners of this property and the former the folks that had an interest and helped develop that 2005 amendment, but we did not have a copy of that executed agreement until that Friday before the hearing. So it wasn't a last minute surprise on purpose, and it didn't come from us, but it did establish the fact that the city has already made the decision not to go through the middle of that property. So at this time, I want to make sure I've covered everything that you have asked regarding regarding this proposal for annexation. I just want to highlight a couple of things. When the city was contemplating the transportation system plan back in the early 2000s, when we were accommodating Royal Caribbean, a for-profit enterprise, the city made the bold move to vacate a portion of that already built road and relocated, showed the location of where the minor collector would go. We would like to help with that and basically finish the job by moving that minor collector over onto the Lane County property. And I think that would be beneficial to not only the community, but also for Royal Caribbean and for the future development of that property. So there are some legal issues that were raised by the opponents and by the city attorney today. And the question is whether or not the comprehensive plan policies require you to look at the uses. And last time I provided you with a LUBA case that stood for the proposition that annexations require you to look at the annexation and not the use, the territory to be annexed. There's been other cases that I have that we've analyzed that have been cited by Mr. Gilardi in his material today. I've reviewed those letters, those cases, and we are drafting a letter to respond to those. But the importance is that the other case, the Woodburn case, that's a case where the code, Just versus Lebanon, City of Lebanon, the code, the local code, it was different than our code here. It specifically required the city to analyze a proposal for development before annexation. So the city had already determined when they adopted their annexation code in that particular city, they said, you've got to come up with a plan. And before we annex you, you have to show that there's a key level of urban services. What the city said, the city tried to interpret their code differently, and the developer wanted the city to, and they got overruled by LUBA, and LUBA said, no, your code, if you look at your code requires a development plan. That same language is not in your code, and it's not even in your comprehensive plan policies. Those comprehensive plan policies that are pointed to by Mr. Gilardi and by the city attorney's office are more general in nature, and they're not as specific as requiring an applicant to provide a plan or even intended uses. And the reason why is because those intended uses can change. I mean, heaven forbid these projects don't go through. The property still should be annexed and still allow the city to collect taxes, and when development occurs to exact system development charges. So at this point, I'm going to ask if City Council has any questions of me, and then reserve some time for rebuttal.
Does anybody have any questions? You cited a lot of material. Does the city attorney have that material?
The city attorney has most of that material, but some of the material that I cited to was in response to what we received from Mr. Gilardi, and also in response to the material regarding the 2005 agreement. We will get that to you in writing.
Okay. I've got more questions, but I think I want to hear from everybody else first, because I'm sure we will all be ready for a lively discussion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I've got a handful of cards. I'm going to call them up in order. So we're going to do the people who support In favor of the proposal first, Melissa Glass. Could you state your name for the record? It's got to be green when you're ready to go.
Good evening. My name is Melissa Glass, and I am a citizen here in the city of Springfield. I'm here tonight to speak on behalf of someone who no longer has a voice, my son Ethan, who died by suicide at the age of 31 after years of struggling with his mental health. Ethan first spoke to me about his mental health when he was 14 years old. He talked about his continual sadness, struggles with sleep and concentration, and feeling like he didn't belong. He began counseling and a low dose of medication at that time. Once in college, he excelled in his studies and from the outside was happy and healthy. It was on the inside where he was broken, suffering, and exhausted from fighting. He began to use illegal drugs to mask his mental illness and, like so many others, flooded his body and mind with drugs, creating a perpetual cycle of addiction and mental crisis. Ethan spent years going between inpatient addiction rehabilitation and behavioral health inpatient services. His last visit to an inpatient behavioral health unit was in February 2023, when he admitted to me that he had suicidal thoughts and a plan to end his life. I drove him to the behavioral health hospital, hugged him, told him I loved him, and watched as he walked away alone and scared. After a 72-hour mental health hold, Ethan was discharged with new medications. I had always checked in with him daily, and he shared with me that the new medications seemed to be working and he was feeling more hopeful. He then began the daunting process of searching for a psychiatrist who could take on new patients and be able to refill his medications, which were going to run out in 30 days. My husband and I found his lifeless body on March 30th, 2023. His medications had run out, and he had been unmedicated for 6 days. Taped to his refrigerator were 2 business cards, one for a psychiatrist, one for a counselor. Both appointments were scheduled for the following week. He had been able to get those if this facility had been built then. Lying on the bed next to his body was his journal, and his last words written, "I am tired, the voices just won't stop." He did the best he could until he couldn't any longer. He didn't want to leave us, he just didn't know how to stay. Ethan was more than his mental illness. He was brilliant, brave, kind, and curious. He was a loving son, brother, uncle, and grandson, had a bright future, a family who loved him fiercely, and a disease he could no longer battle. Looking around this room, I wonder how many of us are in the same boat. I cannot bring my son back, but I can stand here and tell you that there are other sons and daughters in this room and in this community who are struggling to stay afloat. We owe it to them, and we owe it to the memory of those we've lost to build a community where help isn't just a hope, but a reality. And I am asking you to choose to invest in saving lives. My son suffered silently, so no one could tell. If you see me smiling, know that my son taught me well. Ethan, I love you more. Thank you.
Thank you. And we're so sorry for your loss. Thank you for sharing that with us. I have Amanda Holberg.
Hi, I'm speaking in opposition to this being built because, as I stated last time, like I've had multiple people tell me pretty much horror stories about this hospital, and I have one recorded. I omitted the name to protect the privacy of the victim, but I'm going to play that for you guys. And also, you should know that they're trying to build this on the I-5 and Beltline corridor. That is where all the child trafficking happens. When you're in these facilities, you don't have, like the HIPAA laws that are supposed to protect us, they're what make it so you can't reach the outside world. If you get put in there by a negligent foster parent that doesn't want to take care of you, that wants to make a quick buck, no one's going to know what happened to you. And I'm going to play this for you now. Is this on?
Peace Health psych ward in Springfield. And being there, I had also been to the one that used to exist at University District in Eugene. And being there, they had stripped me of my clothes and they had injected me with medicine to the point where I couldn't walk and I couldn't, I would basically go straight to sleep. And to me, the way that they had yelled at me and said that I was batshit crazy, and the way that they had completely abused me physically and stripped me of my clothing, I just have a strong idea in my head that they had raped me before through either my procedures done by a ENT doctor or through the psych ward when they had stripped me and they had given me medicine and made me fall asleep. I do believe that it is possible that I have been raped because of Peace Health and the employees, and there are people out there who have most definitely been raped by the Peace Health employees and doctors.
The point is, I know you guys make money from this hospital and stuff like that, but at some point we need to put children's safety ahead of corporate interests, especially when the corporations are not helping, they're not protecting, they're further traumatizing people that are probably there already because they're traumatized. We need a community that's safe for the kids, that's safe for teenagers. We don't need more cages for them.
Amanda, could you state your name and address for the record?
Amanda Wahlberg, 275 South Garden Way.
All right, thank you. Ardell Wicks.
Hey, Council. My name is Ardell Wicks. I'm the Chief Financial Officer at Richardson Sports. I appreciate you continuing the hearing and letting us, as we find out more information about this, to continue to comment. As we stated last time, no one at Richardson Sports feels these projects shouldn't be built. We definitely need them. However, we are continue to be very concerned about the location, as the city staff report indicated that as part of the annexation agreement, we're supposed to look at how does it match the overall plan and consideration of the comprehensive plan and the planned districts. I'm not an attorney, but it doesn't seem to match if we're having to override rules or get waivers for them. I appreciated the applicant's discussion about much of the available land there at the hospital, but I'm still perplexed as to if land is so scarce. I'm surprised that we're selling the 45 acres, or they're selling the 45 acres of MDR land. If we're needing to change and override zoning, I would think that we would be talking about changing the zoning of that MDR land to meet the needs. It's closer to the hospital and we believe more consistent with the overall zoning. Also, just another comment. When we purchased our property, there were a few acres, the back parking lot, that was not annexed into the city. And as we went through that process of looking at development and that, we had to go through an annexation process, negotiating where the city looked at our uses and made sure that they were properly zoned and approved. And then we also had to do a discussion and negotiation with the city, offering up compensation land to help pay for the portion of the transportation needs for the area. And just from a back of an envelope standpoint, it doesn't appear that what we paid per acre for the annexation 10 years ago is being offered up as part of the annexation of these close to 20 acres. So again, I appreciate your hearing us and listening and making these tough decisions that you have to make. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael Chiardi.
Good evening, Mayor, councilors. Again, Michael Gilardi, legal counsel for Richardson Sports. I put a package of materials into the record today. There's also a letter from the president of Richardson, Kelly Richardson. I urge you to read. We talked last month about how there's two layers of issues. This is consistent with what Ms. Kraz said tonight. The first layer is, a threshold legal issue as to whether the annexation can go forward, given that the use isn't consistent with the city's comprehensive plan. The county and Peace Health have not offered an effective legal argument on this. They cited one case out of the city of Woodburn, doesn't say what they say it says. There's other cases that are on point. That's the city attorney's analysis. I agree with that analysis. G Group's attorney, Greg Hathaway, agrees with that. You can read more about it in our letters. The fact is that the city's own comprehensive plan policies that are specifically about annexation require you to look at the proposed use, whether it's permitted in the zone, and if it is, if there are adequate public facilities and services. That's the standard. So we stand by our argument that this annexation can't go forward because the use isn't consistent with the comprehensive plan. Furthermore, the applicants have not offered you a compelling reason to change the city's longstanding policies. I appreciated the discussion about Peace Health's land holdings. We have our own map of Peace Health's land holdings. What I think I understood Peace Health's attorney to say is we got a 75-year plan for the 20 acres that are undeveloped around the hospital. So they're saying in 75 years, we might build something that's more important than this facility that everyone agrees is needed now. That's just the 20 acres. There's another 40 acres to the west that are undeveloped. It's mixed use zoning. That zoning allows hospitals. Their arguments about the location don't add up. Moving on to that second layer, the streets issue. Councilor Moe, you asked about how do we decide where the streets go. The city decided this in 1999. It's in the conditions of the partition approval. It's in the plat. This discussion about the 2005 agreement and all the other streets, it's a red herring. Those streets are in addition to the north-south FedEx road. Finally, the traffic issues. What you heard from the applicants last month was our traffic argument is better than the opponent's argument because we have an engineer and they don't. That's not true. We have an engineer too. There's a letter from him in the record today. Also, our analysis is based on, our arguments are based on their traffic analysis. Their analysis shows that the Beltline intersections either currently don't meet standards or very soon won't meet standards. And so as a matter of law and as a matter of good policy, they have to fix those intersections before this facility can be operational. Also, to meet the city's obligation to ODOT under the intergovernmental agreement. No one's talked about that yet. Finally, look to the city of Corvallis. The city faced very similar situation to you're having. The hospital there made the same arguments. Corvallis didn't accept it. Look to Corvallis. Thank you.
All right, thank you. If we have questions for Mr. Girardi, do we need to go through the application, the applicant's rebuttal first, and then have him back up? Okay. Yeah. Okay.
I would have talked slower. Thank you.
So I had a couple questions, and then I'll let other folks jump in if they've got them. Could you help me understand this question that you guys bring up consistently about Peace Health's other property?
Mm-hmm.
Is that a criteria of approval for the annexation? They feel like they're different conversations. I know that it's politically interesting, but is it a criteria? How should I consider that?
That's a great question, Mayor. It's not an official criteria on the face of the city's rules. But what the comprehensive plan says is that you have to evaluate whether the use that's proposed is a permitted use. And we know that it's not a permitted use based on the Haas proceeding that we went through last year. And when the city council decided that hospitals and emergency medical facilities wouldn't be allowed in the zone. And so what the city attorney is telling you is maybe there's a way you can interpret your comprehensive plan to sort of get around that discrepancy. And what we're saying is you don't have to do that legally, number one, because House Bill 2005 doesn't apply. And you shouldn't do it because there's not a compelling reason for you to change your policies, for you to change the way you've interpreted your own rules, given all this other land that's available to PeaceHealth. That's our argument.
Okay, thank you. And I think the other question that I have is, could you help us understand from your client's perspective? I don't think they gave testimony for the rehab hospital, which had a zone change, if I remember correctly, attached to it. Could you help us understand the discrepancy in their opinion in these two issues?
Absolutely, Mayor. In that proceeding, they went through a plan amendment and a zone change. They're trying to avoid that process. They're trying to avoid all the planning and the scrutiny that goes with that process. That was the purpose of the supersetting law, was to get around them having to go through that plan amendment and zone change process. When they were first discussing acquiring this property, they assumed that that was going to be the case, and apparently they decided it was too difficult, and so that's why they did the supersetting, to try to shortcut so they wouldn't have to meet the standards that are required when you go through a plan amendment and a zone change. So that's why our position is different now than it was then. Also, this is a different kind of facility than was proposed there, which we think, has the potential to have greater impacts on the neighborhood.
And then could you zoom back to the transportation issue, because we're still having this conversation about where exactly the road should go. From your perspective, why does the original map, I don't know if it's matter, support, like why the original road location?
The city determined that was the proper location back in 1999, and you heard from the city staff last month that they still think that that's the right location. They still think that that's the right street plan, and we support that because we want to see Maple Island Road be built out in an efficient way. Richard, as you heard from Mr. Wicks, Richardson has reserved land for that. We want to see that street get built. We agree with the staff that this is the best way to do it.
And my last question, I promise, I know people are eager to get into this. So when you think about the two, and I know this isn't a rezone, but when you think about the two uses, could you talk to me a little bit about why it sounds like your opinion is that sort of medical uses in a campus industrial zone is not compatible with a campus industrial zone. Is that accurate?
We don't believe it's compatible with campus well, not all we certainly had this debate last year, and we had a lot of discussion about what kind of medical uses would be okay. And we worked with, all the parties worked together. We had a robust debate, and at the end of the day, we all decided to abide by the council's decision, which was a compromise decision. So we think that was a good compromise in terms of what kind of medical uses are compatible and which kinds are not. And we asked the council to stand by it.
All right, thank you. Wait, did anybody else have any other questions before I let you go? Oh, Councilor Buck.
So, I'm going to need a little bit of help with some of the legal interpretation because I don't quite understand it. So, can you help me understand the conversation around House Bill 2005? Obviously, PeaceHealth's counselor says that it doesn't apply, and you're saying that it does. I'm not understanding the argument, and so help me out here.
Sure. I hate to speak for PeaceHealth and their team. Our argument is that House Bill 2005 does not apply to this annexation at all, and I think I've heard PeaceHealth sort of echo that. The city attorney's position is maybe a little bit different, and certainly Ms. Kras can speak for herself on this. I mean, the plain language and legislative history of 2005, which we've put in the record, shows that it doesn't cover annexation at all.
Okay.
So we're asking you to apply the city's normal annexation policies, and our argument is those policies require you to look at the use that's being proposed. Is it a permitted use in the zone? That's the first question. And then if so, okay, do we have adequate public and facilities and services plans to deal with that potential use. We think it's clear, based on the Haas proceeding, that the crisis center is not an allowed use in this zone, and therefore it's not consistent with the comprehensive plan.
And then the second question that I had, you know, and I guess I have the same question for Peace Health, to kind of. So when we look at that Beltline Gateway intersection, and if we say that it's problematic now, whether it's meeting standards, the city has said that it doesn't meet the city standards in terms of intersection performance. So that's going to be true regardless of the outcome of this. It's not performing well, even if that land stayed vacant. That's not performing well. Part of the annexation, as you comment, is to bring intersections up so that it mitigates the problem. And I'm wondering what your interpretation then is it's an already existing problem that this annexation didn't cause. It's not going to necessarily, I'm not sure if it's going to make it worse, but it certainly didn't cause it. It's an existing problem. So is your position that Peace Health has an obligation to fix an existing problem? I'm just wanting to clarify that piece.
Thank you for the question, Counselor. The legal standard is that there has to be a minimum level of public facilities, and there's particular definitions around that when it comes to traffic and roads. And what the applicant's engineering analysis shows is that it doesn't meet the standard, and it's going to be worse if the crisis center is built. And so therefore, as under the annexation criteria, that situation has to be rectified. The intersections have to be fixed so that they meet minimum standards before the crisis center can operate. Basically, it has to be fixed while it's being developed. We're not saying it has to be fixed today, and that was the Woodburn situation, right? City of Woodburn said, we don't like this subdivision for whatever reason, and our criteria for a planned unit development, which is a type of subdivision, say that streets have to be a certain way. Today, the streets aren't that way, so therefore we won't approve it. That's not what we're saying. We're saying by the time that it's developed and is operational, those streets have to be fixed. That's the legal standard. And so they have to do their share of that. Now, certainly there's takings law there in terms of how much you can require an applicant to do, but the applicants haven't done the analysis or at least haven't shared with you the analysis of what would be required, what it would cost, how much of it they should be responsible for. And this is the Corvallis situation. So, very similar. There are intersections on Highway 99 West that are problematic, but were going to be worse after, Good Samaritan annexed the land and expanded their campus. Good Samaritan said, very similar to what Lane County and Peace Health are saying, we don't have to make any offsite improvements to these intersections because we fall under this particular exemption to the state transportation planning rule, which is a term that you've heard bandied about a lot by the applicants. That was their position, basically the same position that the county and Peace Health are taking here. That was 2 years ago. The city of Corvallis said, no, we don't agree with that. We think our annexation standards are different and require more. Certainly that's Richardson and G Group's interpretation of Springfield's standards as well. Corvallis didn't accept Good Sam's position, and they're still negotiating that 2 years later. So we think that that's something that Springfield should at least study and see if there's something we can learn from that.
All right. Any questions? Councilor Quadros.
So I hear you talking about traffic, but I do want to hear some of the other primary concerns that your employer has regarding what you stated earlier is the impact to the neighborhood.
Sure. Well, you mentioned certainly traffic is one, certainly, creating a business climate where people want to come and work, where people are safe to work. Richardson employs, and this is in the record, Richardson employs hundreds of people. They work oftentimes odd shifts. where they're leaving work at night. We want to make sure that, they feel comfortable coming and going from work every day. So certainly the public safety emergency response services are part of it. That's one of the public services that apply to annexation. There's a case out of Cave Junction that's specifically about this. The applicants haven't addressed that at all. We think that's one category of public services that needs to be addressed that hasn't been addressed. And there are also particular issues with this site in terms of it being in the floodplain. And in terms of the drainage, it sounds like they have a stormwater plan that's different than what Richardson has had to do, than what the Temple has done, and that they want to discharge stormwater to Maple Island Slough. We think there's potential environmental issues there, and they haven't been addressed at all in terms of, having a plan for how you would deal with those. So those are some examples of the impact type issues that we're concerned about.
All right. Other questions? Thank you for coming up for additional questions.
Sure. Thank you.
All right. The next, I do have staff response to any testimony. And I will note for the sub folks, it's probably going to be a while still. You're more than welcome to stay, but I know we could reschedule the time to present your material.
I guess just a quick comment from planning staff's perspective. I did receive testimony that I passed along to the city recorder, and hopefully it made it to council right at the end of the business day today. So needless to say, staff has, I guess, personally had a chance to review it cursorily, but our transportation planning engineer has not been copied on that information. So there will be additional staff analysis required before we can kind of wrap up the staff report and provide a comprehensive analysis of all the testimony that we received, which is right up until now, essentially. So, and there will be probably more to come tonight. So that constitutes staff's position right now. We're kind of waiting for the end of testimony before we can kind of summarize and formulate recommendations. And I'm sure I'll see what Christina has to say too.
And a couple of things I wanted to try to clarify, because both the applicant and the testimony from Mike Gilardi for Richardson touched on this point. My recommendation is that House Bill 2005, or the now codified in ORS, does not apply directly to the annexation. Where I think it comes into play, not legally applies, but comes into play, is that without that law being passed, the contemplated proposed use for this property probably wouldn't be the Crisis Stabilization Center. So I think that the lawyers all agree that House Bill 2005 itself does not apply, but it's clearly context for the intended development of the property. And I think you heard where we disagree on that and how you consider intended development. I can address many of the comments the applicants and opposing counsel made if that's what counsel would like to hear, but I don't want to use the time if that's not going to be helpful to you tonight.
No, I think it would be. I think it would be helpful.
Okay. There was a comment from the. I think first going to the land need. I'm not sure that it's directly relevant to the criteria of approval, except that the Gateway Refinement Plan does talk about medical services, and I'd be happy to dig into more on policies around, planning for a major medical facility as it was discussed in the Gateway Refinement Plan. I have not been able to locate any Oregon Health Authority rules that require specialty clinics like, for example, a sleep center to be located near a level 2 trauma center. So that might be an area where the council could use some more information. There are requirements for within a level 2 trauma center. But my understanding is that there are special types of specialty clinics that it is desirable from a property owner, rent collection, economic perspective to have located near the hospital because they're higher profitability margin uses than mental health treatment that tends to have a fairly low Medicare, Medicaid reimbursement rate. But that's not information that we have documented in the record. And if that's something the council wants more information on, I'd like to be able to get that to you. If that's something you're you think you should consider. The TPR, Transportation Planning Rule, that's discussed in more detail in the council briefing memo. But I did want to talk about the comment from the applicants that the criteria under the transportation rule, that the annexation criteria are much more toned down. I don't necessarily agree that that's the difference in analysis. I think that the transportation planning rule requires a detailed look at significant effects on planned or existing transportation facilities. The annexation criteria requires you to provide timely, orderly, and efficient provision of services. And so I think in some cases that can be a more general review, and in other cases it's going to be more detailed, and it's going to involve case by case look at what does timely, orderly, and efficient mean for a particular annexation. So I just wanted to, I don't think there's a hierarchy of analysis. I think it's a different analysis. There was discussion about the city council from the applicant that the city council does not have discretion to state where local streets must go. There was a comment that the council does not require residential streets in certain locations at the time of residential annexations. The city council, in fact, does regularly require the location of residential streets for annexations. There was a very recent annexation off 19th Street where the annexation agreement provided specific key local street connections that would need to be made upon a certain level of intensification of use of that property through a subdivision or additional development of a certain number of units. So that is just factually inaccurate for how the city council's traditionally applied your criteria. And then you do, I believe, have discretion to determine where local streets go in the context of applying the criteria of approval. And those are laid out in the staff report. A few of those criteria are the TSP Policy 1, that I can pull up and read, back to you, but it's in the staff report. And then the Industrial Element Policy 7 in the Gateway Refinement Plan. Both of those have to do with providing efficient transportation networks, and it does not distinguish between those collector streets or say only for collector streets. It talks about the entire network. And of course, local streets are an important part of the entire transportation network. I also don't agree with the applicant's read of Just versus the City of Lebanon. And I think that this may be in the Mr. Gilardi's written comments, but I haven't had a chance to read those in detail. I was hoping I could just read to the council from that case. This is an Oregon Court of Appeals case. This is actually not Land Use Board of Appeals. Lebanon's criteria of approval included, they had annexation policies. We call those urbanization policies, but they're essentially the same type of policy for the same purpose. The City of Lebanon shall require proof that urban services are available or can be made available to serve the property considered for annexation, and the additional demands that would be placed on those services will not overburden their present capabilities. Public right-of-ways necessary for safe and efficient movement of traffic, bicycle, and pedestrians shall be provided with annexation and without obligation to the City of Lebanon. And the parties involved in seeking annexation or who may be included in the annexations shall initiate a program to upgrade any urban services and or public facilities within the area considered for annexation that do not meet standards as may be established by the City of Lebanon. While those are different wording and maybe slightly different legal standards than the City of Springfield's criteria, they are very, very similar to your criteria to provide for the timely, orderly, and efficient provision of public facilities and services and to mitigate fiscal impacts on the city. The Court of Appeals stated that the policies I just read to you, there's one additional policy. The city shall consider impacts on community facilities before building, rezoning, or annexation requests are approved. And the court said those policies contemplate the city will consider a specific development proposal. They require the city to consider the impact of the proposal of public facilities and services, the impact of the proposal on public facilities and services when the city makes its annexation decision. So I wanted to just provide you some relevant information from that case because you're hearing a lot of different people's opinion on what the case stands for. I think the Court of Appeals was really clear that certain types of policy language have an implied obligation to look at the impact on public facilities and services of a more detailed land use proposal than just generic zoning. I think the council has to, when no specific proposals required, you have to make findings about what's likely future development, or the annexation agreement has to set boundaries on what that development can be. And it's often included as a requirement to go through site plan approval where you apply the normal criteria for that. And then I think the Mr. Gilardi discussed a question, is other property a criteria of approval? So I think I touched on that. Depending on how the council wants to look at or apply the Gateway Refinement Plan, I think that's where that would come into play, is looking at the Gateway Refinement Plan as a detailed area plan and looking at how this proposed use fits in within that Gateway Refinement Plan. I am not sure that, I think this is where we would, like Andy said, we would want more comments. I'm not sure that the 1998 road location makes a marked difference on whether Maple Island Road itself gets built out more efficiently. I think it more impacts the way traffic moves efficiently to Maple Island Road, which may also be what Richardson's interest is, but I thought that was a slightly nuanced position, and I wanted to be clear that we'll have to follow up with you on where your local road goes, how that might impact whether or when Maple Island Road gets built. I'm not clear on that right now, so we'll have to work with Michael on that. And then the impact to the neighborhood. So public safety and emergency response is discussed in the staff report as one of the issues around provision of police services and medical services to this property. When I've spoken with Springfield Police Department staff, command staff, they acknowledge that if the facilities are operated the way that they have intended for them to be operated, that they could provide a net benefit in decreasing demand on Springfield Police Services as compared to current responses to the emergency room, because it may offer a more efficient way to for SPD to interact with people who are undergoing mental health crisis. But there's also the possibility that the facility over time, or for reasons outside of expectations now, the facility may not operate in the way it's intended to be operated. And so we could also explore a good neighbor type agreement that would be a little different than a traditional good neighbor agreement, in that it would talk about the ways the facility will operate to reduce the impact to SPD and police response. I also think that providing access to transit will be a key element, could be a key element of what the council wants to look at and hasn't been discussed yet. This proposed crisis stabilization center and the building for the mental health hospital will be much further away from a bus stop than either of the existing emergency rooms are in Springfield currently. I do not know about the University District Hospital and where it's located relative to bus stops, but the existing bus stations are within a few hundred feet of a bus stop on a frequent transit network, or pretty close to that in terms of service frequency. And just based on their conceptual site plan of where buildings would go and where LTD is at currently, it would be a quarter mile or more walk to that nearest bus stop. So I think that proximity to transit is another aspect that you may want to look at. Any other questions I can answer?
Councilor Buck.
So to clarifying on something you'd said, Andy, and then just kind of a process and point of order for you, Christina. Question. So so the existing staff report that we have, you're saying that the staff report that you haven't hasn't had a chance to contemplate new information, and you're kind of waiting as staff to kind of gather all that, close the testimony before you can consider, okay, let's respond one time to all of it in a staff report to kind of wrap this up. Am I hearing you correctly there?
That's correct.
Okay. So Christina, what are the rules and the mechanisms available to us as a council for how to proceed, so that we give time for all of the public comment and all of that to come in, but also have like a cutoff date.
Should we maybe wait and let the applicant have their turn to make their closing comments before we figure out what to do next?
Well, I'm just curious what the procedure optional are, but okay.
I'd be happy to talk about the procedural option at like a really high level now, so that if the applicant has a preference, they can say that in their rebuttal.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I want to avoid us
Yes.
getting into deliberating the next
Into
step.
real details, but the general options are you can close the hearing tonight or you can continue it again. Continuing the hearing gives you the benefit of being able to engage in direct question and answer. At this point, you could continue the hearing for a smaller set of issues or questions. I don't think need to have it wide open if you don't want to. If you want to say we'd continue it and we want to be able to hear about or talk about XYZ, that's an option. You can keep the record open for additional information. I think the record needs to be left open for 7 days because new information and testimony was submitted for this hearing. So under state law, you have to leave it open at least 7 days for response to that material. You could decide to leave it open for longer, for other for all comments. If the council's interested in reviewing an annexation agreement before your next deliberation, staff would like to be able to put that into the record, for example. So those are the general. We're not recommending that you close both the hearing and record tonight. So either the hearing's continued or the record's left open for some period of time, and then we can get into more detail later on the exact timing and procedures. Ultimately, the applicant has to have the opportunity, unless they waive it, to have the last review and response to any new information.
All right, great. Are there any other questions for the staff before we have the applicant back up? Councilor Stout.
I was just curious about the fiscal impact on the revenue and the taxation side. It doesn't need to come out now, but I'm mostly curious on like the net taxable impact, with considering Measure 5 and compression and all of that. Thanks.
I did a little bit of research. So Riverbend the hospital is subject to property taxes. For Timber Springs, Peace Health had to file what's known as a certificate of need. And I can get that excerpt of that into the record. They included a high level, almost like a pro forma for that, and estimated $1 million per year in taxes that were not income taxes. I'm not sure if that was 100% property taxes, but I think it gives some ballpark on what the property taxes could be from that facility. If the $1 million per year is all property tax payments, then about 25% of the property tax payments in that area are what goes to the city's general fund. That's generally not enough to address the structural deficit. No one property in Springfield can really annex and develop and solve your structural deficit. So you heard some comments in the original hearing that, annexing and taxing property or SDCs would pay for or mitigate financial impacts. I don't think that's accurate because of the structural imbalance the city has and the cost of providing emergency services, and then coupled with the fact that only a portion of the Gateway Beltline projects would be paid for with system development charges. And that's potentially something that the applicant could provide more information on. Unlike most development applications, tax revenue from the proposed project can be relevant to this decision, where you wouldn't look at that in a plan amendment zone change or development code amendment or discretionary use permit.
All right, other questions? I think we're ready for the applicant.
It's real quick. I'm going to move back over here so I can answer procedural questions if they come up more easily.
Thank you. Yeah, your microphone on. You'll be a pro by the time you're done with this.
You have more faith in me than I do. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Mayor and City Council, again, for the record, Mike Reeder. I want to just go through the rebuttal in the order that it came in, because I think that makes more sense. But there's some things we're going to talk about that are a little more pressing for you tonight. So first of all, in regards to, I missed her name, but the second speaker who testified in opposition, I just want to make clear, we will follow up, we will attempt to follow up with her and find out what's going on there. There were some serious accusations made that we want to follow up with, and we're sensitive to that. Next, I want to respond to Mr. Wicks's comment that the question about, well, if land is so scarce around the Riverbend hospital, then why not rezone the MDR property? Well, it's because we have two crises. We have a mental health crisis, we have aging population, and we also have a housing crisis, and those are all interrelated. Medium density residential, you have already made the ultimate policy. You've heard me say this over and over again, but that's what land use attorneys talk about. Your ultimate policy decision is that this property that is over 40 acres of developable medium density residential property be developed for medium density residential housing, which is sorely needed in this community. And in fact, it will also have the dual effect of if and when it is developed for housing in the near future, be a benefit to the community because care providers will be able to locate close to the hospital. And not only do you need the square footage, the 1.2 million plus square footage that we have at Riverbend, and we're going to need more in the future, but you also need the people to staff that square footage. And this is a comprehensive plan. We didn't just think of this last year. This planning framework has been going on for decades. So there is an answer to those questions about why not Riverbend. I understand that Richardson did help pay for some of the infrastructure with their annexation agreement in 2012. So did the previous owners of this property. So I don't know if I can pull this up. I'm not confident I can. Yeah, can you pull up my PowerPoint, please? The Maple Island Road, we as the applicants haven't even talked about how that has already been given up. That property has been, the Lane County property to the north is already carved up with Maple Island Road dedication. And that was the previous property owner. That Lane County has the same type of obligations that Richardson and Hawes and others have given up. Thank you so much. What would I do without you, Andy? Okay, let's see here. Let me quickly go there. Okay, you see the dotted green on the north part of the Lane County property? That is required to eventually be developed on Lane County's property. So all of the dedication and construction of property on Peace Health and the Lane County property, in addition to that, is also goes to the good of the order, goes to the Springfield community. I want to address Mr. Gilardi's comments. He said there were two layers of issues. There's the first, the threshold legal issue, which he doesn't say explicitly, but which is really saying you can't approve the annexation because this isn't allowed use in the CI zone. That's essentially what the argument boils down to. And that cannot be. So we have stated for the record, and I will state it again, that House Bill 2005 doesn't apply to annexation because annexation doesn't allow the city council to deny the annexation based on the comprehensive plan policies that were identified by city attorney's office and by Mr. Gilardi. But if they did, House Bill 2005 would kick in. And because the specific language of House Bill 2005 talks about the fact that local governments in urban growth boundaries shall approve these uses without the need for a comprehensive plan or zone change. So if Mr. Gilardi's position was correct, that the comprehensive plan and the comprehensive plan policies could somehow prohibit this use because it's not an allowed use in the CI zone, or the comprehensive plan policies kick in to prohibit it, then House Bill 2005 would kick in by the very terms. So yes, House Bill 2005, nowhere will you see the word annexation. What you will see in section 60 is within an urban growth boundary. So it could have said within a city limits, but it doesn't. It says within an urban growth boundary, which this property is, a local government shall allow a crisis stabilization center as defined by the statute. Within an urban growth boundary, a local government shall allow a mental or psychiatric hospital license under the statute and may not require a plan amendment, zone change, or conditional use permit for the property on which the facility is sited if the property is on property zone commercial employment or industrial land. So even though it doesn't talk about annexation, it also says that you shall allow this use on this property without us having to go through a comprehensive plan process. So that's the plain terms of the language of the provision of the superseding bill. So we also heard that I actually heard a conflicting statement. He said, Mr. Gilardi said, when it comes to using this property for this use, you shouldn't do it. But then he says, why not oppose the plan amendment zone change? Well, he said, well, because that was a different process. So which is it? Is it a concern about losing campus industrial land or not? And I'm not sure which that is. He also mentioned that this is a different type of facility. Okay, so this is, and talk about the impacts. This is the reason why we have federal laws such as the ADA and the Federal Fair Housing Act and the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act is because those are seen by the federal government through experience throughout the states as disfavored uses. And you're hearing that tonight. So to the extent that those impacts of the clients of a stabilization center or a behavioral health unit can be, even if you could take that into account in this annexation application, which you can't, federal law prohibits you from doing that. Okay, the real head scratcher, the 1999 land division for this property. In 1999, the city said, as part of a condition of approval for the land division, that the applicant will provide for a potential future north-south connection. Potential future. It did not require a dedication. So Mr. Gilardi's issue with, it's totally irrelevant. The 1999 land division has no bearing on where we put the road. And in fact, in 2005, the city already made the decision not to do it. So I am really struggling to understand why the city staff is pushing for this north-south connection. I understand why someone who opposes this particular intended use on this site would want it, because it would be problematic for Lane counties because of our proposed, our intended use of the property and the location of the facility. So if you want to gum up the works, but in terms of a transportation strategy, I just don't see it. And the city council, as I've exhaustively explained, has already made the ultimate policy choice of where those minor collector roads go. And this is not that. Okay, so if you go to the annexation criteria, let's see here. It says, let's get to C. The proposed annexation will result in a boundary, and that's the boundary, the territory that you're intending to annex, in which the minimum level of key urban facilities and services as defined in the Springfield Comprehensive Plan can be provided in an orderly, efficient, and timely manner. Minimum has meaning. Oregon state law, ORS 174-010, requires that we give meaning to all provisions of your code. You have to include minimum. So when Mr. Gilardi and when the city says that the transportation planning rule requires that these facilities be, I think I heard Mr. Gilardi say this, but if I'm incorrect, please forgive me. But that if the Beltline Gateway intersection isn't fixed, then you can't approve that. If that's not what he's saying, I apologize. But if that's what he's saying, that is not accurate. Minimum level of services mean, is there a street? Is there a way to get to the property? Is there water? Is there sewer? Is there stormwater discharge? And I might add, we're not proposing to, when this property is developed, to discharge into the slough. Just want to make that clear. But it's minimum level of services, and that minimum must have meaning. It can't be, well, upgrade something that has been a problem for quite a long time, and it's going to continue to be a problem until there's a solution. And the applicants propose a way to help with that solution, which is $321,000 to provide a study for experts to figure out how to knot that intersection that's so problematic. Mr. Gilardi talked about a case in Corvallis. That was a plan amendment zone change. It was not annexation, as far as I understand. We just received that today, so I haven't vetted that in detail, but that's what I understand. And then he's talking about how they've been negotiating it for 2 years. I'm sorry, we don't have 2 years. You don't treat crises in 2-year timeframes. There was discussion about needing to have, Mr. Gilardi talked about needing to have people safe at work. Well, this is a public safety proposal. We are proposing that the intended use will help with public safety. You heard that on May 18th, that it's going to help reduce the times where the police have to wait for the discharge of someone who is going to the stabilization center. And it will be impactful for the entire community. Related to what I was talking about with the transportation planning rule, staff said they don't agree with the distinction. Ms. Kratz talked about the transportation planning rule and having significant effects. Well, we've already demonstrated that there are no significant effects to the annexation. And even if you were to take the intended use, we in fact will mitigate the planning year horizon level of service and V over C ratio for that intersection. So in actuality, we're improving things, not making it worse. Ms. Kratz is correct, and I told you, they're good. They cross the city attorney's office, they cross their T's, dot their I's. They're very thorough. It's correct. A sleep center does not need to be located next to the hospital. I misspoke, and for that I apologize. The other uses that I listed, the other however many dozen or so uses, those are required to be adjacent to a tertiary center. So, 1 out of 12 is my error, and I apologize for that. Okay, let's talk about the most important thing that I think is before you, which is, can you consider these comprehensive plan policies? Okay, and the just decision that Ms. Kratz talks about has a very important distinction that's critical in this case, and that is, in the City of Lebanon had a comprehensive plan policy that specifically required a development plan. The plain language of the comprehensive plan said that if you're going to annex the property, you have to have a plan. There is nowhere in the code or the comprehensive plan that I can see that talks about a plan, a development plan. And so what the city did was, the city erred in that case by saying, you know what? We know you don't have a plan. We're going to annex you anyway, and we'll hold you to that. We'll hold you to a plan later on. Well, LUBA and the Court of Appeals said, no, you can't do that because the plain language of your code specifically says you can't defer it. You can't waive it. You can't defer it. That's not the case in this particular case. So the case law is supportive of the applicant's position. And I'd like to just further nail that down with the fact that we have have briefed this. We will provide that briefing to you in a comprehensive way so that it's easily digestible, because it sounds like we're going to be keeping the record open. One last thing that I want to say regarding Mr. Gilardi's comments regarding the transportation issues. Well, at the time of the hearing on May 18th, Mr. Gilardi's client had not engaged, or he had not provided anything to us. It wasn't until today when we received a 2-page memo from Mr. Colmo about the transportation system analysis, and we've actually taken the time to respond to that. Miss Kelly Sando is here to respond to that if necessary. But let me just this June 1st letter, everything that Mr. Colmo says is addressed. So first, he talks about a TIA, a transportation impact analysis. That's not in the record. That transportation impact analysis was done well before the application, and it was part of the due diligence. It was not the transportation planning rule analysis that's in the record and that we're relying on. So that's the first thing. The second is the first thing that Mr. Colmo talks about is he talks about the couplet he doesn't give credit for the couplet being a fix. Well, you as a city council, you've already determined that the couplet is a potential fix. It's part of your planning horizon. You're receiving SDC funds to make that fix. We all recognize that it may not be a fix, which is why we're planning to pay the $321,000 for the study to do something in the alternative. But for the time being, that is part of the transportation system plan. And we as an applicant have the right to rely on the transportation system plan. And then the intersection analysis, we have provided documentation to show that the intersection at Beltline and Gateway will be improved. And we do not have to go through and say, you know what, can't annex any more property because you have this problematic intersection. That's not part of the criteria for an annexation for approval. And it would really hamper any other development in the north part where you've already brought in property for employment, large lot employment on the north part of your property. And if anybody ever wants to do a plan amendment zone change, they'll be going through this, such as the Royal Caribbean property or any others, you're going to be having to do that analysis. So with that, I am happy to answer any questions that you might have.
All right. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, I've got a couple. So my question is really, so you refer to the conversation around in different places where you want us to defer to our policy choices the council already made. So like with the MDR zone, right? And in some cases, some of the transportation choices. How do I weigh that with the fact that that both the supersiding bill and the position of your clients is that you want us to defer to policy choices we made in some cases, but not necessarily defer in all cases? That feels inconsistent to me.
Yeah, Your Honor, that's a great question. So first of all, I don't.
Job.
Honorable Mayor.
That's okay. It's late.
You don't have to call me Esquire. I want. I could call you Commissioner, but no. So that's a good question. So the issue before you is that. Okay, the ultimate policy decisions are ultimate policy decisions that this body can and has made. When the state or the federal government supersede your ultimate decision policy making, we all know this, you have to abide by that. So it's not inconsistent for us to say, hang on to your ultimate policy decisions that you've made that require going to the Planning Commission, being adopted by ordinance by the City Council, being noticed, going through all that, having public hearings for transportation system plans and for comp plan amendments and all those things. And also at the same time saying, well, by the way, you got to abide by state and federal law. I mean, it's no different than saying you have to abide by the amendments to the Constitution. It may not be in your code, but you still have to do it. So that's
Okay. And what happens if we require the road to go essentially through the middle of the property? Is the project untenable at that point?
Well, okay, yes, but in development, you just never say never, and you don't want to back yourself into a corner. But essentially, yeah, you're destroying Lane County's and the entire plan. There's really other negative consequences that, as an attorney, I don't really get into, but the architects and the civil engineers have assured us that no, you do not want the road going through the middle. And if you pull back, even if we don't have the intended use, let's say this intended use never gets developed, and later on it needs to be developed, we still think it's a bad idea to put the road through the middle of that, because it's carved up with Maple Island Road. And then if you put a T right through it, you're really making it very difficult for any type of reasonable development on the Lane County property.
Okay. And I think I've got one more question. Well, it's at the crux of this, right? You mentioned it in your opening, sort of comments, was that campus industrial has been a challenging zone for a long time, right? But that is an area that we have invested heavily, and that's been a long time a vision of, and we have plenty of we have plenty of businesses and community stakeholders that are very valuable to the city of Springfield that are up there. And the crux that I'm trying to kind of work my way through it is when you describe it, it's sort of like the end of campus industrial as we know it, right? And that choice is kind of being given to this community opposed to us choosing our future. So how do I balance those two things?
Yeah, great question, Your Honor. Richard Babcock is considered the godfather of zoning, and his mantra is change is the name of the game in zoning. We are a much different community. We are a much different state, and we're a much different nation than we were in 1992 when the light medium industrial zone, campus industrial. Yes, the city has invested heavily. The landowners have invested heavily, but you need to ask yourself this question: what is well, first of all, the property's been vacant since forever, but since 1992, and what is going to be the harm for this use for the neighbors? How is it really incompatible? I would posit no. It's a very compatible use. People may have a stigma, related to people who are suffering mental health crises, but this is to accommodate that and to help the community. But if you were looking at this for, let's say we were going to use a use, let's say it wasn't mental health. Maybe it was the inpatient rehabilitation hospital. Maybe we need another one. Would we be talking about the uses? Would the neighbors come out in opposition? I think not, based on their testimony today.
All right. Any other questions? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
I guess we have to choose a path forward here.
Yeah, so I think the first question is are there topics that you're wanting additional verbal presentations on or back and forth on? I think that's the first sort of threshold question. Are we wanting to hear more from folks and have the chance to ask them questions?
And Councilor Riley.
Like in real time.
Thank you. No. That's my brief answer because I have no filters. I don't think that I need to hear from people, but I did read through the staff report a couple of times, and I think there are some issues that I think we need to dig into and that came up here tonight around the traffic, the public safety, the whatever those three words you had for whether or not, we're going to be able to serve the property in the ways that we need to serve the property. And it looks like that's an underdeveloped area. I don't need to have people tell me about it, but I think that's part of that. We need to address that. And just in case I don't want to talk again, I support the closing the hearing, but keeping the record open.
Well, I think that's the first decision we've got to make. So is everybody comfortable with me closing the hearing? Okay, I'm seeing head nods. Okay, so I'm going to close the hearing for this, and then do we have to choose a date when we want to keep the record open to?
You do not need to choose a date to leave the record open. If you want to leave it open indefinitely until the next time you meet and then decide what to do with the record, that means the next time that you meet, you likely can't make your final decision. I do believe the applicants are eager to have that decision made before the summer recess, so that's something for the council to consider.
Given the amount of content here, I feel like that would be challenging. If we just go with a 7-day period, is that going to give the staff enough time?
I would need some really clear direction from the council tonight on which findings you want to make, and would need to spend some more time this evening walking through the staff report and each interpretation of a policy and all the issues that have been raised. So I think staff will rise to whatever bar you set for us and make every effort to, but it would be a challenge on the council, I think, both this evening, and we would be challenged as staff to do that, but we work for you.
Well, I appreciate that. We don't need to set any Olympic records for staff work tonight. So I'm looking. I think if we're gonna need more time to work, could we do it this way? Is that we leave the record open, and then we do additional work, because you're going to ask a ton of questions of us, and I'm going to see everybody turning into a pumpkin tonight. If we schedule more time in June to go through some of those questions so that we can get the record closed, is that possible?
Yes, that's certainly one of the options.
Okay. Do we have to choose a specific date to do it again?
I think it would be helpful to let all the parties know the next date you intend to schedule the item for, so that they'll have assurance of when at least the record will be open until. I would feel more comfortable making that decision on the record of when you're going to hold your third reading, so that everybody knows the minimum time the record would be left open, and we can talk about what further open record period would be needed at the next meeting, depending on, again, what new materials we get.
Okay, so
and then the other question I would have for you is, do you want the record open for any and all new evidence, or do you only want the record open? So there's a couple things you could do. You could decide on a date to keep the record open until when the next time you meet. You could say we only want the submittal of responses to issues already raised. We don't want new information or arguments or evidence. We just want responses or elaborating on things that were raised tonight. If somebody submits something outside that threshold, the council would then have to consider next time you meet whether to reject materials, which I think you have authority to do if it's outside the scope of what you leave the record open for. And then we would have to have some opportunity for the applicant to provide a final analysis or rebuttal of that in writing before you could close the record. So you'd either provide that 7 days leading up to when you're going to meet, or you'd provide it after you meet if you're going to want the record open even further.
So from a process perspective, right, we come back, we do a third reading at some date that we're going to decide. If no work on a potential annexation agreement gets done until the record's closed, and then we give some direction on where to go.
I would recommend that we leave the record open at least at the when you're ready. If or when you want to look at a proposed annexation agreement, I would recommend that the record that we allow an open record period for the public to respond to the draft annexation agreement, and some time for final applicant rebuttal. Because I want to err on the side of caution that the draft annexation agreement, I don't want anyone to argue on appeal that there was a procedural issue because the draft annexation agreement wasn't available for written response.
Go ahead, Councilor Buck.
So just kind of commenting, Mayor and Christina, it sounds like the way we have to do this is a couple of steps. We have to leave the record open for whatever's going to come, and then take a look at that, and then the next step is if something new comes, then there can be a period for response to that, and then the record is completely closed. So we're gonna have to kind of do it in steps, so that if new information that the public or the applicant or the folks opposed want to bring, there is a period of time to do that. Then we close that part of it, give a period for response, and then the record is completely closed. I think that's how we have to do this, if I'm understanding it, but I may be missing something.
Okay, so go ahead.
The legal minimum is, at this point, 7 days for anyone to respond to things raised at the hearing. That could be elaborating on things they've raised. It could be responding to documents that came in or testimony tonight. Then that 7-day ends, and then we have to give the applicant 7 days to respond to that stuff. That's the minimum requirement. The council can do more than the minimum requirement.
I guess go ahead, Councilor Redley.
I think that we need to give staff a chance to respond in there. So I'm hoping to like a
Yeah.
3 weeks or so.
I'm thinking, I'm looking at the council agenda calendar right now. I think maybe we look at the 29th. It is a fifth Monday. We'd have to come back to this, but this is going to be a significant amount of time. Would everybody be okay coming back the 29th? Is that
I don't think I'll be here.
okay?
If it matters to the council, I will be on vacation on the 29th and would need to talk with my spouse and family because
Let's not do
that's
that
been
then.
planned for a while.
Do we have to choose a time tonight? Can we?
No, you do not have to choose. I think it'd just be helpful to say I don't even think you need to set like time and place certain. I think it'd just be helpful to say we're considering this date or no earlier than this date so that folks have an idea of the minimum time they have on the record. I want people to know when when's the next time you're going to meet that you could potentially close some or part of the record so that they get their stuff in before that and they're not watching council agendas every Thursday to figure out if this is the week that they got to get it in.
But we want all these folks to come visit us every time.
Right.
Then I would say the 22nd if that's going to work. If that's going to work for folks, we're going to have to move some things around on the agenda to make room for that. I'm just looking at how much is there, but would everybody be good the 22nd?
Okay.
Do I need that in the form of a motion?
No, I don't think it needs to be in form of a motion. To be clear, you want just the record left open at a general level. Any new evidence, argument, you don't want to be looking at, does it respond to stuff from the hearing or not? I think you can ask folks to limit what gets submitted so you can make a good analysis of it. But I just want to make sure I understand what
Yeah, I think we're wanting to keep it as open as possible, understanding that people should use their best judgment about what would be open. And frankly, this, if stuff comes in Monday, 5 minutes before the hearing, it would be challenging to read.
Yeah.
Right. And so I would encourage people to get additional material open to us earlier.
Okay. So I think if you're going to leave it wide open, then there's no action to take because there's no change in the status quo from how it is now. If you were going to limit it, then you would need to take a formal no.
Okay.
Formal.
Is everybody good with that? I'm seeing head nods.
Thank you so much for working through that with me.
Thanks for keeping us on the right path. All right. Then I think we're good with that one. We do have a couple more items. So I'm going to give anybody, I don't know, if you don't want to hang around for the rest of the items, give about 2 minutes for you guys to exit. You're more than welcome to stay. Could I call the next item, please?
The next item is business from the audience.
I know. Okay, I've got a couple cards. I'm going to call Dave Willis and Jeff Nelson if you want to come up with him. We have 2 seats.
My name is David Willis, and I serve as Board Chair of Springfield Utility Board, a community-owned utility with a mission to deliver safe, reliable, cost-effective water and electric services to the residents and businesses of Springfield. A key part of that mission focuses on being good stewards of ratepayer dollars. One of the questions sub-board members hear most often from ratepayers and stakeholders is how SUB, as a ratepayer-owned utility, balances requests to invest in the broader community with one of SUB's core commitments, which is to keep rates cost-effective. Sub is a community-owned utility. We operate under the charter of the city of Springfield, but we are managed independently and led by an elected 5-member board of directors. Like other representatives in government, Sub's board is directly accountable to the people of Springfield, and so is the utility itself. Sub is somewhat unique in how we are funded. Unlike municipalities, Sub doesn't receive a share of property taxes. And unlike private utilities, we don't operate to make a profit or focus on generating returns to shareholders. Instead, as a community-owned utility, we operate on a cost recovery basis. What this means is that Sub relies almost entirely on the water and electric rates our customers pay. That makes the utility very conscious of the fact that Sub's money is not actually Sub's money. It belongs to ratepayers. Sub uses a good portion of these funds to build and maintain a significant portfolio of infrastructure and operational systems that support this community every day, and our rates reflect that responsibility and investment. One of the most important and visible ways we invest those dollars is through the infrastructure we build and maintain. Reliable, resilient water and electric systems are foundational to everything this community wants to achieve, from housing to business growth to public safety. Projects like the Glenwood Substation and the Mackenzie River Water Supply Project are good examples. These are long-term investments that expand capacity, strengthen resilience, and help position Springfield to meet the community's needs as we grow. They may not always be thought of as traditional economic development tools, but they're essential to making economic development possible. In addition to those large-scale investments, Sub contributes to the overall health and success of Springfield in other meaningful ways. Each year, Sub provides an in lieu of tax payment to the city totaling nearing $3 million. These are ratepayer funds that can be used wherever they are needed most to support city priorities, including economic development. At times, we hear suggestions that ratepayer funds should be used more directly to support development, with the assumption that future revenue will make up the difference. In most cases, that math simply doesn't pencil out. The payback period for many of these ideas is 150 years or more. In practical terms for ratepayers, that means the return is never realized. Sub-ratepayers also support our most vulnerable neighbors through Sub's Project Share program, which has been in place since the early 1980s. We provide more than $250,000 annually to help low-income Springfield residents keep the lights on and stay safe and comfortable through cold winters and increasingly hot summers. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff Nelson.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. My name is Jeff Nelson. I'm General Manager of Springfield Utility Board. I provided a packet of information for you. I've also emailed the city manager a copy of our audit report. Sub is pleased to provide that audit report for the council's review. I would just ask if you have any questions on that. I'm not going to go through that in detail. If you just direct those questions or work with Nancy, and then we can respond to any questions you might have. I'll just highlight a few things. One is just responding to questions that I've gotten or comments I've gotten from city council people. They're very curious, and I appreciate that. This in part has to do with in lieu of tax. And so just as a reminder for history, because some council members have changed over time, you might recall that about 4 years ago, I went to the sub board because I saw that our in lieu of tax payment to the city was low. It was not in alignment with what I'd seen as an industry standard. So Sub's board approved me working with the city to increase what we paid, the ratepayers paid to the city for in lieu of taxes. And it's almost doubled since the time that existed prior to that point. So we came to that agreement. At the same time, we do charge the city for sewer and storm water billing services. And so that rate I had kept lower until we reached this agreement to rebalance and reset and make the in lieu of tax appropriately higher, so it matched more the industry standard, and the payment that the city pays to Sub for those billing services increased at that same time. So there's a story there that is tied together, but what I really appreciate about this community, it's about trying to do the right thing, and if things are a mismatch, we try to step forward and have a conversation, explore interests together, and I appreciate your curiosity. And with that, I'll stop.
Thank you. I have two more cards. Skylar Coy. I do not see. Okay. Nicholas Luge. They must have already left.
We believe they left, correct.
Neil, do we have any hands raised?
No hands for this item.
All right, next item, please.
If there's no business from the city council,
I think we are good.
the next item would be the payroll tax ordinance, and that's Nathan Bell's item. I'm sorry, Nathan. There's no ordinance here. I can read it real quick. This is an ordinance adopting the Springfield payroll tax code by adding section 7.1200 through 7.1216 to the Springfield Municipal Code, adopting a severability clause and providing an effective date.
Right. Good evening, Mayor and Council. The item in front of you this evening is a request to conduct a second reading and adopt or not adopt an ordinance adopting a Springfield payroll tax. In a regular session on April 20th, we conducted a first reading and public hearing. This is the second and final reading. Before I turn it over to you, are there any questions for me?
Does anybody have any questions? All right.
I'm half asleep already. I move to adopt an ordinance adopting the Springfield payroll tax code by adding sections 7.1200 through 7.1216 to the Springfield Municipal Code, adopting a severability clause and providing an effective date.
I will second.
Please.
Yes, Counselor Weber,
Yes.
Counselor Mo,
Yes.
Counselor Rodley,
Yes.
Counselor Quatros,
Yes.
Counselor Buck,
Yes.
and Counselor Stout.
Yes, thank you.
Motion passes 6 yeses, 0 nos.
Any
Means
other
that-
business from the city manager?
No further business.
Any business from the city attorney?
No, thank you.
Richard, thank you, everybody.